across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
And good afternoon. Yeah, welcome. Home of Common Sense. Thank you to Julia. She's back on Monday. And, of course, we echo everything that Julia was saying about our Ricky. Is our Ricky my first producer as well here at Talk? Top man. He's only going to be a couple of floors down, so we'll bump into him at the corporate bar once in a while. Coming up this afternoon, the BBC sharpening the axe again this week, announcing the first wave of cost-cutting programmes that will see, well, something like 550 jobs, cutting 80 million quid in programming. Meantime, it emerges as well. By the way, did you clock this? That a pro-migration charity has been planting asylum seekers onto Question Time and lobbying broadcasters to push positive migration narratives across television in general. We'll look more at that as well. Also this afternoon, Oxfordshire's Liberal Democrat Council, as you've been hearing, is seeking a High Court injunction to ban the St George's flag near public highways, threatening 2 years in prison. These people are literally ill. They are literally mentally ill. Details on that. And England won the World Cup last night. Did you clock it? What a great match. I didn't catch the trophy in the presentation bit, but boy, what a winner. 4-2 against Croatia. And, of course, Harry Kane equalising Lineker's record of 10 World Cup goals. Though defensive frailties, bit of a touchline clash, apparently, between Tuchel and Pickford. He's our keeper, by the way. May give some fans cause for concern. We'll have details on that too. Everything you need to know, all the breaking news right here on Talk 0344 499 1000. I'm going to start with this. We used to always sort of flag this as one of our favourite clips. Have a listen.
Licensed dodgers, watch out. The Minister of Post and Telecommunications, John Stonehouse, is on the warpath. Nearly 1.25 million householders watch the telly and don't buy a license. But they better, and quick. Detector vans with highly efficient equipment are out in force seeking TV bandits in an intensive campaign to cut back drastically the number of Welshers.
Bandits and Welshers. Wow, that's how they used to do it back in the, what was it, the 50s or something of that nature. But they are sharpening their axe over there at Beeb HQ. The announcement, the first of what could be many in their cost-cutting review, 550 jobs disappearing immediately. As many as 2,000 jobs are potentially going as well. The corporation is trying to save £500 million over the next few years. The initial round is expected to save about £160 million. Now, before anybody starts playing the funeral march, remember, this is an organisation with revenues of more than 5 billion quid a year. The BBC owns the world's most successful content export business, by the way. BBC programmes with the obvious stuff, Doctor Who, Top Gear, Strictly Come Dancing, all the David Attenborough. I mean, what's that David Attenborough back catalogue worth? Trillions, I would imagine. It generates an awful lot of money through international sales and licences, but things have got to change. Please meet the brand new Director General.
Hello, my name is Matt Britton and I'm honoured to be here at the BBC as the incoming Director General. Information, education, entertainment for everyone.
Yeah, and job losses all round. He came from Google. I've got a feeling this fella knows a thing or two about business. The real problem, of course, for the BBC is not just about money, it's also about trust. For years, the Beeb has traded on being the broadcaster everyone trusted. Today, and I know it largely depends on which side of the political divide you are standing, it's either hopelessly biased, hopelessly woke, hopelessly establishment, or all three, and that's just before breakfast. So we have issues around it. The irony, of course, is that while audience drift to places like Netflix, podcasts and other streaming services, the BBC still behaves like it's 1997 and everybody rushes home to watch Clive Myrie read the 6 o'clock news. The future probably isn't a compulsory licence fee at all, but maybe a hybrid model of subscription, commercial income you could throw in, and certainly a slimmed-down public service core feels inevitable. The BBC's challenge isn't just surviving, it's persuading people it deserves to survive. In the meantime, expect more of this.
Oh, give me a gin and tonic. No, make that a double. I need it. I just bought my television licence.
0344 499 1000. Peter, how you doing? Oh, look, I'm asking Finn, our producer, saying, should we send the guest in? And Finn, because I wouldn't say he had a late night last night, but he had a bit of a late night. Looked at me like I'd just arrived on another planet. Guest? What you talking about? He was enjoying my rant, Peter.
Yes, I was, actually. It was very interesting. Well, very well put, actually.
Listen, well, thank you very much. We've talked about the BBC quite a lot.
Just a tad.
It comes up quite a lot. And here they are in their first kind of phase of, you know, what they would call proper cost-cutting exercise.
Yes. Yeah.
I mean, is it enough? Are they on the right path? I said there at the very end that this is really not just about surviving. It's persuading people that it deserves to survive.
That's the key point now, is that the BBC is now fighting for survival that it's never had to do. It is now competing in what is kind of its first venture into the free market. This has now got to convince viewers to actually tune in. And when there are now so many options, it's very interesting you bring up the David Attenborough, because I did just look it up. That's what I was doing. It's estimated to be worth roughly.
So it's your fault. It wasn't Finn's fault.
It wasn't me. You asked the question.
Fault.
You asked the question. It's about £500 million to £1 billion, potentially.
The Attenborough stuff.
The Attenborough stuff. When you look at it from a streaming perspective, that's potentially what it could be worth. So again, when you say it's got £5 billion in revenue, it's got all these other bits coming in. Lack of money is not its problem. It really has that's never been its problem. It doesn't know who it's talking to. Yeah. It doesn't know who its audience is. It keeps trying to appeal to everybody and therefore appealing to nobody. Yeah. That's the real downfall. And then when it comes to actually managing these giant budgets, they've never really had anybody with any skill in that, because they all come from an area that has been driven by the public sector, where the money tap is always turned on. Now you have somebody from Google who is very cutthroat when it comes to this stuff. Google is infamously famous for sacking very large groups of people pretty much on the spot when a programmer isn't
if you
going
don't
in the
believe
right
that,
direction.
look it up.
It's actually quite terrifying to work in the software development industry over there. But now somebody's come in and is ruthless in that aspect, maybe they might get somewhere. But the problem is with the new Director General, he's not aware of the kind of the political issue that the BBC finds itself in. So it's who is he getting advice from?
So he's going to come in with one skill set, which is great, but he's going to lack the other skill set, which is kind of the editorial side of it and tastes and what people are looking for. I mean, not everybody, just because we live in a world of kind of app-based technology streaming, it doesn't mean that every single person wants all things in life fed to them in that way. I mean, there is that side of things.
Oh, yeah, definitely. But the problem is this guy is also sat on the board of The Guardian, who haven't made a profit in a very long time and don't really appeal to a very broad audience.
Who, the Google boy?
Yeah. He's actually, he sat on the board of The Guardian, so...
Well, now this story has taken a whole new turn.
Which is why I wasn't really surprised when everyone went, he's woke. I went, what, the guy from The Guardian is woke? Who knew that? Who saw that coming? I mean, absolutely shocking. But, you know, they seem to have picked this guy, obviously, because his business acumen, but also because he's digital and tech focused, which is where the BBC should be going. Because let's not forget, iPlayer was the first streaming service. Yeah. It was actually one of the kind of groundbreaking piece of technology that they had, and they just completely, threw it away. And now they've done some deal with YouTube, but that's all kind of up in the air because of the TV license, which Tim Davie once said in the select committee, I can't believe we're still getting away with this.
Yes, that's true. That's true. Should there? I mean, is there an argument? I suppose is the greater argument for a kind of something that isn't completely commercial. I mean, even America has something that isn't completely commercial. I mean, these things don't, you know, the sort of public broadcast services and the like, Australia and other countries have them. But they're very minimal in what they kind of do. I suppose the question that is culturally interesting is whether there is a need for that in society, whether we look at a television service as being something that is just there for pure entertainment, whether it's got other kind of... the argument back in the day, which is the one you can no longer have, because all the other channels didn't exist, was that the BBC was like a cosy pair of slippers. You know, on a Saturday evening, you could sit down, you could watch... Sorry, Jim will fix it. You know, that was the start of it all, frankly. But you could get... you'd have the Generation Game, you'd have Doctor Who, you'd have Starsky and Hutch, you'd have Parkinson, all of these shows. And this stuff didn't appear anywhere. It was like one banger after another. You know, these things were great. It's wow. Everybody talked about it. Families got around the telly. All that has kind of gone. Now, and you can no longer really say, well, we're going to ask everybody for 180 quid a year for a nice family experience. That's not something you can sell. Really.
Yeah, considering the fact that people don't sit and watch TV in that like, rather traditional way of actually watching live television. I actually couldn't tell you the last time, apart from maybe sport or something, I couldn't tell you the last time I watched a live event on TV that probably wasn't rolling news.
Yeah.
And I think that is the big thing that the BBC has not really got into its mind, is that people don't just want variety of programming. It is the freedom to which they can now choose to watch something. And people like to binge and, you know, like save everything up and watch it all in one go and that kind of thing. The way that the viewer now interacts with the BBC is radically different. But also, people always point to the fact that the BBC is really good on its kind of radio situation and local journalism. The reality is it's a somewhat of a monolith. It is a kind of crushed down many commercial local radio stations because it has no fear of the tap turning off and the money disappearing. So realistically, this kind of thing that people hold up as a great bastion for journalism has actually done a lot to crush it at the same time.
Well, this is the thing, and it's not a subject that gets a lot of airtime, and it's not one that's really that interesting to quite a lot of members of the public. But if tomorrow I decided that I wanted to start an online news site, just doing news for, you know, England, Ireland, Scotland, Wales, global, bit of culture, bit of tech thrown in. If I wanted to do that, I am already at a disadvantage because there's something called the BBC, which has been given millions and millions, hundreds of millions of public money that I can't even, I could not get a foot on that ladder if I wanted to. It's an unfair playing field.
Well, without a doubt. And this is the big problem, is that if people love the BBC so much, go private and see if people will buy the licence fee. Actually test the theory that people love the BBC. People say they do, but when you actually have to, you know, given the option of not paying money, particularly in the middle of a cost of living crisis, there's a very strong chance people don't love it that much.
That's very true. Well, what is the future of the BBC? Actually, you might know about this. Me and Finn, our producer, were talking about, is the question, what is the future of the BBC or for the BBC?
What is the future for the BBC itself? Because it's its own decision to make. That is the big point. Every catastrophe is of its own making. So, you know, it's whether the BBC is capable of saving itself or...
Yes.
Yeah, I always say it needs to be saved from its friends before its enemies.
I was actually rather hoping you'd give us the linguistic correct answer. Is it of or for?
I just confused the question
No,
even
I know
more.
you did. No, it's fun. It's fun. No, the only... Because actually, when I said it out loud, we think about these questions and they're... So what is the future of the BBC is actually correct, but when you're talking about it as if the BBC is on trial... It's probably for, isn't it?
For, yeah.
What is the
BBC?
For. For the BBC.
Yeah. Yeah.
So me and Finn got it wrong, is that what you're saying?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah? Well, what do you want to do about it, Peter Barnes?
I don't know. I've got a break, I guess.
Yeah, we might have to in a minute. So there is the question, genuine question. What is the future for the BBC? In the sense that when you consider what it's meant to do, what it does how many boxes does it tick for you personally? As Peter said, when you look at the huge amount of... I mean, you think of the programmes they sell around the world. I mean, even EastEnders probably makes a fortune. Top Gear
was the most exported programme around the world. I think there was 2 countries in the world it didn't export it to, and one was North Korea. Yeah, so there you go.
The BBC literally own the most successful content export business on the planet.
Technically, the people, we own it.
So it can't be the money. And even when they knock out a sitcom like that thing called Amanda Land or whatever, not my cup of tea, but apparently it's incredibly popular. That one about Wales that George Lamb was in. Gavin and Stacey, all of this. How much I watched that. These things just sell in all the English-speaking territories. They fly off the shelves. So there's a lot of money made. It's obviously something about the model.
The thing is, when you use Gavin and Stacey as the example, that was quite a long time ago. It's actually its recent content has nosedived. Yeah. If you like everything that we think of as great BBC content, it's quite a way back now. It's not exactly any fresh new things. Maybe it's had a one-off 3-part drama that used to come on a Sunday night. Those were pretty good at one point. But even now, most people don't really tune into it because there are so many other options, and more importantly, I don't think people really want to have a lecture on, racism or the EU or God knows what else every other day of the week just because they, want to have 5 minutes to themselves.
They've also been coming for a bit of stick for some of their World Cup coverage, and part of that is because whilst ITV have been sitting there against a New York skyline, their team have been in Salford. But it's been, I mean, obviously the commentary is that
Yes.
team are in the States.
Yeah.
But the sort of green screened setup.
Yeah, this is the bit where the public can't complain about them spending so much money flying here, there, and everywhere, and then complain that it doesn't look very good. But when they're in Salford, the public have to kind of pick a side when it comes to that. That's the kind of situation. For me, when it's things like the World Cup, just go. You know, that is the sport and its coverage. It's actually one of the things the BBC actually does very, very well. I always look at things like Wimbledon, for example. It's phenomenal the work that actually goes into those kind of productions. But yeah, we can't complain when they spend money, and we can't complain when they don't. So yeah.
So let's go. So what is the future for the BBC? 0344 499 1000. How much of it do you support, if any? Is there another model? I mean, this is a big operation. If you could, there's another danger as well on this, by the way. Given their dominance, and you know, in the world of news, you mentioned radio and things like that. If they commercialised it, they could wipe out half of the current places that are out there. I mean, if you take sort of Radio 1, Radio 2, they have listen, I know that they don't do what we do here, so it doesn't really affect us in that respect. But if you're a commercial music station that's a bit Radio 2-y, and then suddenly Radio 2 decide they're going to take ads, all those advertisers are going to Radio 2.
That's true.
So they could pop the competition.
Yeah, but what you'd actually eventually have is a level playing field. So yes, you'd have somewhat of a destructional period, but then eventually the market would settle itself, because the worst thing is the markets don't like a big rock sitting there on top of it. So yeah.
And I mean, the BBC News comes under a lot of stick, of course, and they've not really covered themselves in glory. Still, the most confusing, mystifying story in journalism is that Panorama edit. No one has really given us any details. I don't want names, because that wouldn't be fair to suddenly start naming and shaming people publicly, but I'd like to know specifically how that happened, and we've never been really told.
Yeah, and I still don't understand how anybody could say it's an accident. When you splice two things together and you cover over the top of it, you know exactly what you're doing.
And bearing in mind, in the world of television, and I know a bit about this, obviously, it's quite easy to do, sort of jump edits where you can make it known that you're editing. You do a thing called a little flash in between, so they're different parts of a speech, not stitched together to sound like they're one speech.
Yeah, also, when you've had previous accusations of the same thing a few months before.
Yes, that's right. I mean,
again, a pattern forms when all your mistakes trend in one direction.
Yeah.
That's when you get institutional biases.
Thoughts on this? 0344 499 1000. What is the future of the BBC for you? Which bits do you like, hate? What model would make it work? Or, I mean, there is a school of thought that we don't bother finding a model. It doesn't matter.
The Germans have a very good one where they connect it to your version of a council tax. And it varies through that. The German system is actually not that bad for it.
And do you know what? I bet they've got a very long word to describe it as well.
Yes, which I will not attempt to pronounce.
Yeah, indeed. More from Peter Barnes in a couple of moments' time. 0344 499 1000. That's where we are. This is Talk.
We've actually put up with half a century of being told that somehow our national flag is a symbol of oppression. Now, I think if Oxfordshire do this, they'll find themselves completely and utterly defied. People will literally just defy this. And you know what? If people have moved to this country and they don't like our flag, I've got a really simple idea. Go back to where you came from.
Do you ever fear about being arrested because of the socks you wear, Nigel Farage?
Well, I do. You want to see the underpants? Oh, dear, no.
There's the thought. Wow.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
22 minutes after 1, Peter Barnes is with us. I want to talk about this story as well. The asylum seeker posed as a child to enter the UK before sexually assaulting a 15-year-old. I mean, I don't know how often we see these stories, but in 2020, Mehran Habtu came to the UK illegally, aged 24, but fooled authorities into thinking he was just 17. A year later, he assaulted a drunk woman after pestering all sorts of women coming out of bars and nightclubs. While awaiting sentence, he pinned a 15-year-old girl against a wall as she came out of a train toilet, telling her she was beautiful. I mean, goodness me, where else does this story go?
Yeah, sadly, I don't know how many times we have to sit and actually listen to these kind of stories where people abuse the protections that we give to children who come across as asylum seekers, because I go back to, there was a case where a young lad, I think he was like about 21, he was stabbed and killed. He wanted to join the armed forces, and he was stabbed by a guy who had 2 previous convictions for knife crime and had pretended to come into the country as a child. He looked older than me, and that's saying something. And also, I find it hilarious and very, very concerning that the government is actually planning to make it illegal to actually test how old a person is, because you can do it through DNA and X-rays and all this kind of stuff. They're actually going to make sure that you can't do that.
Yes.
Because of, guess what? Human rights. And I don't know, how long before we actually bother to protect people? At what point do we say enough is enough? Because I'm running out of outrage and I'm running out of vocabulary to use with these kind of stories, because it's just one after another, after another, after another. And yet again, we are told that it's not that big of a problem. We'd look the other way. You know, it's all a far-right thing. It's just evidently not. And nobody in the government seems to be the grown-up and actually says, we need to deal with this. And I'm sorry, I don't see it getting any better anytime soon.
Well, the main story, which is within this, is that of O'Neill Spence, who was jailed in America in 2008 for a sexual offence against a 15-year-old. Now, he applied to come to the UK back in 2023 because he's got a wife and child here. They're both British nationals, but was blocked by the Home Office. He then lodged an appeal at a kind of lower immigration tribunal and won permission to come here from the immigration judge, Jonathan Greer, because the lawyers argued that preventing him from entering Britain had breached Article 8 of the European Convention of Human Rights, which covers the right to a private and family life. I don't know what you have to do to be told you're not allowed to go. I would have thought maybe sexually assaulting a minor might be up there as one of the reasons that, regardless of your family circumstances, you ain't coming here, mate.
Yeah, exactly. Well,
I mean, this isn't somebody... This is worse in a way, because this isn't somebody who's already here fighting deportation. This is somebody who's not already here.
Yeah.
So they're trying to get here.
It's the universality of human rights that is being applied. And yet again, it's the same way that we went... The likes of Lord Hermer used the ECHR to go after war... to go after soldiers in Iraq, for example. It's using the law outside of its jurisdiction. It's absolutely ridiculous how they can do that. But, again, the Article 8 is a perfect example. It is the tyranny of the vague. I talk about it all the time. It is this idea that right to a family life. What does that even mean? It doesn't mean anything, and that is deliberate. It is using these very kind of broad terminology, these kind of catch-all phrases. So, you know, I have a definition of it, you have a definition. Doesn't mean it's the same definition. But in the law, if you all have judges from the same kind of school of thought, it does mean the same thing to the judges. This is why the Conservatives, I'm not a big fan of the policy overall, but actually we're right to start targeting immigration judges when it comes to, are they actually making the right decisions for the protection of the people that are here? And when you've got people applying to come here who, you know, have these kind of records behind them, and then they're being allowed in, it just seems ridiculous. Utterly, utterly ridiculous.
I was trying to work out, I mean, I think that's a very good point you've raised. It doesn't really get kind of focused in on enough when a right to a family life it's sort of a catch-all phrase that's meant to sound on the face of it quite a powerful, almost overarching argument. But when you break it down, it means really naffle.
Yeah, it's like fair share is always the one I use. Take our fair share of migrants.
Yes.
What does that mean? What's our fair share? Who gets to decide what's fair?
True.
This is the thing. But again, you just get to these people get to weaponise it and throw it at anybody who wants to control it, because we're only asking to do our fair share of the problem. So they seem like the reasonable people in the room, despite the fact what they mean by fair is unfettered, uncontrolled, and very dangerous levels of immigration.
Indeed. Let's move to this story. England, of course, you might have seen this, won the World Cup last night.
Apparently so, yes.
I might be the only person. 1966.
I might be the only person in the country that didn't watch it, but there you go.
Absolutely unbelievable, Peter Barnes. Anyway, obviously people want to fly the flag.
Yes.
That sort of goes with the territory. And one Liberal Democrat council in Oxfordshire is going to the High Court to stop them from doing it. How much time do they have on their hands? Anyone who puts a Union flag near a road could face 2 years in jail or an unlimited fine. Let's hear Nigel Farage. He had something to say about this, speaking here on Talk Breakfast this morning.
Raise the Colours has been both English flags and the Union flag. Do you know what? I absolutely love it. When I arrive somewhere and see the flags going into a town, my heart leaps. I think it's wonderful because we've actually put up with half a century of being told that somehow our national flag is a symbol of oppression and all that is bad. And these sort of upper middle class chatterati want to ban it. Now, I think if Oxfordshire do this, they will find themselves, and Bristol, they'll find themselves completely and utterly defied. People will literally just defy this. And you know what? If people have moved to this country and they don't like our flag, I've got a really simple idea. Go back to where you came from.
And I don't even think it's people who came to this country complaining about the flag.
No, I don't.
It's other people who complain on their behalf, but they've not even asked for the problem. I bet you couldn't find a single foreign person or a different who's made this argument. This will be just some sort of daft, wokerati dodgepots sitting on council somewhere who would never ever make this argument over a pride flag or a Palestinian flag, but they like to make it over an England flag.
Yeah, I've got to do
2
something.
years in jail.
That's insane. That's totally insanity. This is what I presume these people were dropped on their heads as children.
Yeah.
It's the only logical explanation to have this kind of opinion.
Yeah.
I mean, also, to do this in the middle of the World Cup seems a very choice kind of time.
Bit weird.
I mean, it does also seem deliberately provocative. That's my concern, is this is a council trying to provoke something. I do actually, I'm going to, like I said, do something rare. I'm going to agree with Nigel Farage, and actually this is bang on here, that actually they are going to find themselves in with a lot of open defiance, because people take this stuff very personally, because it is an emotive issue, and to deny the British the right to do something, well, guess what we do? We're going to do it tenfold, because we don't like to be told what to do.
I mean, it's sort of beyond extraordinary, really. I mean, the World Cup's only it only goes on for a few weeks. I mean, at the end, it just put up with some. If you don't like the flag, Lib Dems of Oxfordshire, then don't look at them. Ignore them for a bit.
Have they ever been to Brussels or any other European Union nation? Because you can't move for the European Union flag. It is literally everywhere in Brussels.
I think they would allow that. I think that'd be all right.
You see, oh yes, of course. I remember when we had the flags down the Mall and everyone was saying, oh, it was like Nazi Germany. Then they showed the literal one of the main streets in Brussels with the same EU flags, and nobody said a word. Again, the blatant hypocrisy is staggering.
Bizarre. The council has already spent £15,000 removing over 300 flags. That's £45 a flag.
That's probably more expensive than the flag.
Yeah, High Court hearing scheduled for the 23rd of June, coinciding with England's match against Ghana, of course.
Yeah, I mean, it's just a joke. Utter joke. £50,000 could, there's places in Oxford that will need that money. The councils cry all the time about having been cash-strapped, needing all the money and resources. Yep. And this is what they're choosing to spend not just money on, but their time on as well. Very quickly, we've only got a short period of time on this, but we spoke this week of the horrendous story of baby Preston Davey, who was tortured, sexually assaulted and brutalised to the point of death. His father, or it's not really his father, he was an adoptive father, Jamie Varley, was found guilty. Today, we were speculating on what sentence he might get. We spoke to a former High Court judge from the Old Bailey yesterday. She wouldn't be drawn on what she thought it might be, understandably, but I thought this guy's going to get 30 years or more. He's actually been given a whole life order. Yeah. So he will never, ever come out of jail. He's 37. He deserves to rot there
while he's there. It was one of the most horrific cases for which he denied it all the way through.
And I think that is the most perverted bit of all of it, is the denial. I find, you know, dig a rather deep hole, throw him in it, and, you know, we can all move on with our lives. I think that is what is for the best. And yeah, finally, there is a judge that would like to protect children and punish those who hurt children. I think that is what we can take away from this. There is still hope for the British judiciary yet.
Indeed. Peter Barnes on that point. Thank you. We will speak very soon. Lots to get through here on Talk. Over to you. What is the future for the BBC? Plus, any of the stories we've touched on there, particularly flags, which is always a rather infuriating one. Details to come. Just gone 1:30. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk. This comes from Ian, who says the last thing the Beeb did that I made a point of watching was the Miranda sitcom. I loved it, but that was 16 years ago. That was with that tall woman, wasn't it? Didn't do it for me, because I just thought it was a bit over wacky. Or a tall, slightly clumsy person falls over every now and again over a box in a shop or something. But I'm aware, to be fair to Ian, that it was a bit like Amanda Land. It's kind of in that category. These are, you know, pretty popular. They get great viewers as well in the grander scale of things. Of course, people don't watch live in the same way that they would have done. Nobody rushes home because there's something on the telly. You don't have to wait for a repeat. You don't have to record anything either. Because it's forever there. And that's how TV works these days. I did, by the way, the other day, I had to watch something that was on iPlayer. And I don't often go to iPlayer, but I went there and I'm aware that it's, you know, it was kind of ahead of the game in many respects. Boy, that's a clunky old bit of kit to use in comparison to when you look at what sort of Netflix do. I know it's not quite the same thing. But there's work to be done on that. But maybe, is that the least of their problems? I don't know. We know there's a bit of a crisis going on there at the moment, of course, because there is a huge issue around jobs. 550 jobs axed, £500 million to be cut, programmes scrapped, and the new Director General on holiday. Now it's emerged that there's asylum seekers apparently being confronted reform on Question Time. Well, they say were planted by campaigners. They obviously applied to be in the audience, but it's never a good look. Is this a broadcaster that can kind of, you know, carry on? Does it deserve a licence fee? Is there another form or another way of doing things? Roger Mosey is former head of BBC TV News and Director of Sport. Roger, good afternoon to you.
Hi, Ian.
Nice to have you with us. Firstly, by the way, can I just ask, nothing to do with this debate. As former Director of Sport, obviously the BBC have come in under a bit of stick for being stuck in Salford while ITV are over there giving it large against the New York skyline. What's your take on that?
Well, the BBC can't win, can it? Because if they'd sent everybody to America, everyone would have been complaining about airfares and hotel bills.
True.
TV sport is all a bit smoke and mirrors anyway. So, I mean, last night, ITV, I think their set is amazing. I think their coverage is brilliant, but they are about, 2,000 miles away from Dallas. So, they're in New York, which is fair enough, but they're not actually at the match any more than the BBC are in Salford.
That's a fair point, yeah. And the BBC haven't got a weird person doing a chalkboard explanation during hydration breaks. I don't know what ITV were thinking there on that. That was extraordinary. Nonetheless, let's get back to the basics here. This was always going to happen. They bring in a new DG, and, of course, things are going to change. But the BBC's problem hasn't always been about money, Roger, has it? It's about much more than that, frankly.
Well, I mean, I think the BBC is still a force for good. And I know many of your audience will disagree with that, but we're in a world where there's disinformation and misinformation, and therefore the BBC is something that you can trust. And I know you're going to question whether you can trust everything you see and hear on the BBC, but the BBC tries to be fair and impartial and right about things. And I think we need that more. I mean, I would much rather trust the BBC for my information than Elon Musk. It's a pretty simple binary.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, that's fair, and people will have their own views on that. But, of course, the BBC is often accused, Roger, of sort of still having that mentality from the 90s that people rush home to watch Clive read the 6 o'clock news. And it doesn't really work like that anymore, does it? And there are other offerings in terms of news, not just... I mean, you have opinion channels like this, but, in terms of basic news, Sky, ITV, Channel 4, Channel 5. You can go through your screens and watch CNN News, if you like. You can watch France 24. I mean, it's all out there.
Yeah, though I think in fairness, ITV, we're not sure about its future ownership. Channel 4 is financially quite precarious because the commercial model is not really working anymore. So I think you have to make sure there is something that still gives you public service news. Now, I think that the BBC has a big challenge on because clearly a lot of people are now consuming material in a different way. And you mentioned the iPlayer. The fact is that I would be really quite radical if I were in charge of the BBC, which thank goodness I'm not. But I would get rid of many of the linear channels and go to an entirely digital proposition, make the iPlayer a better iPlayer, the centre of what you do. And that means you can both get rid of the excellent content, but also make a bit less of it. So you don't need to fill linear channels anymore. You don't need to have a 6 o'clock Saturday night programme because that's rather out of date. Yeah. What you can do is, well, the BBC's always said it wants to do, fewer, bigger, better. And that would be a good plan, I think.
I wonder, because obviously the new kid on the block there is, a man from the commercial world, from Google. He knows a thing about the digital world. Is there any word on the street that maybe he's thinking in that direction?
I'm sure they are thinking about that. And the BBC is moving towards more digital services. I think where they're a bit wrong, and it's interesting being on your programme today, is I think the BBC is right that linear television, TV channels are going. I'm not sure it's as true about radio. I think radio, still live radio, has a real emotional power about it, and you like listening to things at the same time as other people and taking part in it. So I'm not convinced that they should be getting rid of the Radio 4 midnight news, which is cheap anyway and really appeals to the people who listen to it. And I would rather they concentrate their cuts on the big ones in television.
The problem, I suppose, Roger, is that if you did sort of not replicate, but kind of went head to head with the likes of Netflix and Amazon and Disney and the like and said, right, this is, the iPlayer is the thing, and then start charging people in a kind of license fee capacity, then you almost make an even bigger argument to get rid of the license fee, because people would be able to see a direct comparison and say, well, that one's free. Well, not free, but I choose to pay it, and that one I'm compelled to pay it.
There are some things the BBC does which I would say are a public good. So the news and information and documentaries and things that people wouldn't make, I think you do need to have some public intervention to support the BBC there. Now, I think you're right when you go into the different value of an iPlayer, but I pay $9.99 a month for Apple TV, and at the moment I think I'm watching one show on Apple TV, and maybe some months it might be two, but I still think I kind of get my value, my $9.99 a month out of Apple. And the BBC, I'm sure, could do a proposition on the iPlayer which you get for the license fee, which would feel like it was good value for money. I think, you know, the BBC is comparatively good value for money because it's a universal fee at the moment, and it needs to convince people in a digital world that's still the case.
On the news side of things, of course, it's come under a bit of stick, and on some occasions, I'm sure you wouldn't disagree, Roger, rightly so. Nobody can, for the life of me, can fathom what the panorama thing was all about. You've been in, you know, I've been in a fair amount of edit suites in my time. You've probably been in many more. You know how it works. You know how people sit there. There could be there'd be an editor, there'd be a physical editor, there'd be a producer hanging around. There might be the series editor. You know, there's enough people in that, even if it's a small group, to go, right, this is what we want. We want you to take that bit, cut it to that, then cut to that, put a flash in there because we don't want it to look like it's one sentence. All of the usual things that take place in TV land. I mean, the panorama thing, I'd love to fully get an explanation from the BBC how the heck that happened. Of course, Mr. Trump is still suing them for that. I mean, good luck if he succeeds, but who knows whether that will come to anything. But it's things like that that very quickly evaporate trust with the BBC.
Yeah, and there is no defence of the panorama edit. It was the wrong edit to make. I don't think it's caused Donald Trump, you know, £10 billion of damage, and he won the election anyway. So I don't think the legal case is well founded. But it was a stupid mistake. And if you look at a number of things the BBC did in the past year or so, Glastonbury being the obvious example, it was just really sloppy staff work that allowed that kind of thing to happen. So for people like me who in the end think the BBC should be there, I'd like to stop making those kind of enormous mistakes.
I suppose that I can sort of see the Glastonbury thing being a sloppy mistake, that somebody thought, oh, God, you know, said that, but we won't go there again, but it's happened, it's gone out. But the panorama thing, I mean, the accusation or the suspicion is that it wasn't a mistake, that it was a deliberate edit to reword or recreate a new narrative.
I don't think that's the case, because the panorama programme overall was pretty well balanced. I think there's a technical thing here, Ian, which is that it was a documentary, a programme without a narration. So it didn't have somebody to say, Trump started his speech by saying this, clip was Trump, and then continued to say this. Second bit. And I think what they did was make it more of a montage. And they were probably, I don't want to defend them, but they were probably trying to convey what they thought was the overall meaning of the speech, that Trump wasn't exactly discouraging the insurrection on the 6th of January. That's my only explanation, but it shouldn't have happened. Absolutely shouldn't.
Final question, Roger, because I know you've got to leg it as well, so no problem there. But 5 years from now, what will it look like, the BBC, and what sort of model do you think it will be in place in terms of funding it?
I hope it will still be there, because if you lost the BBC, I think the nation would be much the poorer for it. But it has to show it's excellent, it's got great value for money, that the people who are supporting it are getting what they want from it. And that's a really tough job. You know, we're in a world in which, as you say, there's loads of digital choice. But again, would I rather have Meta and Google and Musk running everything, or the BBC and the organisation you work for and others? I think we've got to make sure Britishness gets through.
Roger, thank you for your time. Really nice to have you on with us. Roger Mosey, former head of BBC TV News and director of sport as well. Probably about as an experienced voice as you could possibly have on this. Change the model, get it all looking like a streaming service. There's something quite logical about that, isn't there? That you don't see the BBC as channels. You see it like in the way you think of Netflix or Disney or Amazon or Apple. You look at it and there's an array of programmes. They're categorised. Maybe you want some documentaries, kids stuff, films, whatever, and do it that way. Would that become more attractive? How would you fund it as well? Tony is in Hertfordshire. Tony, what are your thoughts on this afternoon?
Hi, Ian. I've not had a TV licence now for probably 10 years or more.
Okay.
And they are aware of it. I do regularly update them and tell them nothing has changed.
Right.
I do not watch any live TV, period. Like, none. I've got my Netflix, I've got Prime, I've got YouTube, where I can watch you guys, I can listen to you on the radio. I do not and will never pay for a TV licence ever again on principle.
What is that principle, Tony? Is it about the fact you resent in a free world being compelled to pay, or is it specifically because you disagree with the setup of the BBC?
I resent being compelled to pay for something that A, is blatantly biased, B, has a very, very pushed woke agenda that thinks that people who sit down and watch it aren't, like, for example, I like historical period pieces, dramas.
Mm-hmm.
But when they're going to show a period piece drama that goes back to a period of time when, I'm sorry to say, the people would have been white because the country was a white country at that time.
Yeah.
They want to say, no, we're going to have lead actors are going to be black.
But that isn't specifically a BBC thing, is it? I mean,
No, that's why I said I don't watch any live TV. I don't watch it.
So Bridgerton would have done you nutting. I mean, that kind of stuff and various others, and Hollywood as well.
Yeah, I don't watch. Even Hollywood, I think, has gone down the pan. Mm-hmm. I think that the whole woke agenda.
Yeah.
It's taken on. We've always seen, for example, I don't care about somebody being gay or straight, and we've had gay couples in movies before. It's never been an issue. You know, it's never been. We don't care if somebody's black or white if they are a good actor.
So you feel that the sort of medium of... Yeah, that's an interesting... It's a wider point, but it's an interesting one, that the sort of medium of television is kind of following a sort of trend, what they think is a trend-setting agenda when it comes to sort of cultural issues, when it comes to everything from gender to race to religion.
Yeah, I think what they're doing is pushing a narrative, as is to say that anyone who doesn't have the same mindset, that they in some way, shape or form, they are racist, they are far right, they are bigots, they are this, they are that. And people are sick to death of A, being labelled that way, and then B, you have the audacity to shove things down the throats of people that in reality is not how people's lives are. We don't walk around thinking, is that person gay? Is that person this? Is that person... People slot into life and they just live alongside each other. They used to make programs. Look at EastEnders. I used to watch. I never missed it.
Yeah.
Never missed an episode. Until all of a sudden what you've got is an episode where they're showing the young lad who's a convert, young white lad who's a convert to Islam, and a young white lad who happens to be gay, comes out, he's a thug, turns out he's gay. They get beaten up, they stand united together. We both know that in reality, we have an issue with these two communities. They don't like each other.
So and soap operas do tend to kind of go down this bizarre line, don't they, thinking that they have some kind of moral responsibility to either engage in or even change the terms and conditions of a conversation. I hear you. Tony, thank you for that. Tony in Hertfordshire starts us off, doesn't watch any of it. Because it's all tosh and wokey and led by rather strange PC agendas and the like. And that's Tony's choice. She legitimately doesn't pay the TV licence. But what does it look like? Pumpkin says, Ian, he just said the BBC are trustworthy. Is he having a laugh or what? It's such a barefaced lie. It's funny, that was the line that he came out with, and I saw Finn, our producer's eyes raise at the same point when he said it's trustworthy. Is it, on balance, trustworthy? I mean, if you watch the 6 o'clock news, 10 o'clock news, then I don't doubt you would probably just get news. You're not going to get, Joe Pike, the political correspondent, saying, well, if you want my view on it, I think Keir Starmer should resign tomorrow. You're not going to hear that. It's not that kind of bite. But that's not really the accusation, is it? The real sort of accusation is that, and like many organisations, the BBC stand being guilty of omission. It's not what is said, it's what isn't said or what isn't included. I think that's the area. On the bias thing, they probably stand accused of in a greater sense. Whether that's right or wrong, individuals can decide. 0344 499 1000. Either way, what is the future of the corporation, of the BBC? Thoughts on that? Lines are open. This is Talk.
We've actually put up with half a century of being told that somehow our national flag is a symbol of oppression. Now, I think if Oxfordshire do this, they'll find themselves completely and utterly defied. People will literally just defy this. And you know what? If people have moved to this country and they don't like our flag, I've got a really simple idea. Go back to where you came from.
Do you ever fear about being arrested because of the socks you wear, Nigel Farage?
Well, I do. You want to see the underpants? Oh, dear, no.
There's the thought.
Wow. Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is Talk. This from Dan in Bristol says, your guest is talking tosh that the BBC can be trusted. They have shown their true colours time and time again and no longer impartial source of truth. Even BBC Verify has shown it's incapable of keeping information impartial. The biggest problem with the BBC is that it's so darn big. So if you see something, I said this before, there was I won't even go over the story, there was something written on a BBC website on a local story. So this was in the southeast. So I'd seen this story. They made a kind of, what I think you'd call a journalistic error in the headline of the story. And once this went out onto Twitter, straight away, it's the BBC again. Look what the BBC have done. Look what they've done. Like it was a conscious decision at boardroom level to write it wasn't misleading, it was just not great journalism, the way they put this together. Actually, what had happened is that a bloke doing the night shift in Tunbridge Wells had gone into work at about 11 o'clock and written a headline. That's it. Wasn't a bloke with a bias. It wasn't a bloke with, probably a bloke with, not know what the hell he's meant to be doing. Who knows? That was it. But, of course, the translation of that is the BBC, and rightly so, by the way, because it is representing the BBC, as if it had been kind of cooked together as some kind of mischievous, deliberate act. It's so big, and individual stories tend to define the entirety of the organisation. Peter is in Bedfordshire. Peter, what have you got for us? Afternoon to you.
Hi, Ian.
Hi.
I was a postman in Luton from like the middle of the 80s to the kind of middle of the early 2000s.
Mm-hmm.
And on the 9/11, when the towers collapsed, there was a spontaneous celebration on the streets of Luton by its Pakistani Muslim population.
Wow.
Now, I know that happened because I was working, I was on the streets, picking up and delivering mail.
Yeah.
Okay, so there was this huge, hundreds of people out on the streets, celebrating, driving around in cars, waving flags, etc., etc., etc. Now, at that time, there was a BBC film unit in Luton at the Three Counties Radio.
Yeah.
And they came out and filmed it. They did, but they never broadcast it. That film was never broadcast.
Interesting. Do you think it would have? I was just trying to think. Working in a newsroom, why you might not want to broadcast that at the time, because it would be seen as a bit of a distraction to a much bigger story. But you might have thought it would found its way into a news story elsewhere at a different time, when there's God knows how many conversations we've had about cultural assimilation and issues around harmonised communities or lack of. That you'd have thought it would have found a place by now, all those years later, Peter.
Well, I've searched for that film, online over and over again, and you cannot find it. You cannot find it. But the journalist who was reporting on it still works for the BBC now. I saw that spontaneous celebration in the 90s when Pakistan won the Cricket World Cup. So
Sure.
I'd seen it before, so I knew what it was. But the second time, it was the exact moment of the falling of the collapse of the two towers.
Yeah.
And
I can only imagine. A couple of things.
It's pretty distasteful, and then for the BBC to bury it and never report on it or never broadcast.
Would they have thought though at the what use would it have been at the time to have broadcast it would be their question. They'd have got it in the neck for trying to start mischief when we should be thinking about the fact that the West is being attacked, particularly America, and thousands of people have died.
The truth is the truth, though, isn't it? You can't bury. Well,
That's true.
Well,
yeah.
The thing is now you can bury the truth, and we've seen that over and over and over again. The BBC, and this is why they're in so much trouble, because they constantly bury the truth.
When you say that, I mean, if there was a giant, I've known loads of people over the years who've worked there in senior positions and still do, in different ways. I've never known anybody think that burying the truth is is anything they would ever do or consider doing. Because it's quite hard to bury the truth, isn't it? If you think about it, I mean, you'd have to go into work and go, "I've seen this story, but I don't want anyone else to see it." So, what do we do? You'd have to tell a lot of people about that.
I suppose, going back to the point you made earlier, because it was such a massive story, it might have been seen as one aspect of it that you could bury.
Well, I would have thought, I can see the argument why you might not show it on the same day or even the same week or two of 9/11, that you might think, editorially, how do we get this into what is one of the biggest, if not the biggest story in an attack on Western democracy, the biggest attack on the United States? How do we get that in there without it looking like we've deliberately crowbarred it in? I can see that being difficult, but it would, I can promise you, and you're right, Peter, that would have found a place further down the line, you might have thought, in the multifarious documentaries, debates and conversations about cultural assimilation. You might have thought somewhere that would have popped into a documentary. Peter, thank you for that point as well. It's a great point too. This is Talk 0344 499 1000. 87222 is where you can message us. Lots more still to come. We're asking the question, what is the future of the BBC in the sense of where it's likely to go? The job cutting and the cost cutting has begun in a very serious way. Where does it go next? And what would you support? What would you even pay for? Lines are open. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is Talk, the home of common sense. Lots to get through. We are responding to the story of the BBC axing 550 jobs, cutting £80 million worth of programming as well. What does it mean for the future of the BBC? Where does this story go next? Goodness me, it's not going to remain as it is, and they can't keep asking for 180 quid that you have no choice in paying for. What would you do with it? What does the future look like? Also this afternoon, Oxfordshire's Liberal Democrat Council seeking a High Court injunction to ban St George's flags near public highways, threatening 2 years in jail. I mean, believe me, if you go to jail for sticking a flag on a railing, we have a problem. The people behind this are ill, by the way. Those that are advocating a prison sentence for sticking up a flag. Even if it is a manky flag that doesn't look particularly straight or nice or clean. 2 years in jail? Get in the bin. And England beat Croatia, of course, 4-2 last night. A beauty of a World Cup opener. We know that Harry Kane equalising Lineker's record of 10 World Cup goals, though there were defensive frailties. Bit of a touchline clash, we understand, between Thomas Tuchel, England manager, and England keeper Jordan Pickford. Many fans have a bit of concern over this. What does it mean going forward? We'll have details on that as well. Everything you need to know, all the breaking news right here on Talk, 0344 499 1000. Steve says, Ian, on a slightly different subject, but extending Tony's complaint about how programmes go woke, I would like to see a woke classification guide, similar to the age classification, so we don't waste 20 minutes of our busy lives before realising the film or the programme we're watching goes down the woke route. Or my best, says Steve. It's a great point, actually. This film contains woke images and images that are likely to offend people who are just basically utilising common sense. Maybe we could do something. Maybe we should argue for that. I'm sure there's some fine voices out there that would support it. Now, the story of the convicted child sex offender from Jamaica, jailed in the States for abusing a 15-year-old girl, but despite that has been granted entry to Britain by an immigration judge. There's also an asylum seeker who lied about being a minor to enter the UK illegally has been jailed for sexually assaulting a woman and cornering a 15-year-old girl on the train. These are not isolated incidents. Let's speak with Ivan Sampson, immigration lawyer. I mean, there's so many stories around this, but let's concentrate on this man from America because he deserved a right to a family life, Ivan. Can you defend the judge in this case?
Well, I think both the first-tier tribunal and the upper tribunal got it right. Absolutely right in this case.
So if you've committed a sex offence in another country, why would you ever be allowed to come to this country? What could be right about that?
Well, let me explain what the law says. And, look, I'm not minimising the seriousness of the offence. I get abused when I come on this by people sending me messages. But look, I totally understand people's outrage. Absolutely right. And the strong feelings about it. But judges are not there to make decisions based on public outrage or on headline-catching, media decisions. That's not how judges work. What the judge is required to do is this. The judge has to look at the rights of the state to prevent this person from coming to the UK and the right to the family to stay together. Neither of those rights are absolute, right? The state has not absolute right to stop an individual coming to the UK to enjoy family life. It's a balancing.
But surely if you've committed a sexual offence against a child, I mean, that would be... A judge would look at that. I mean, I'm not suggesting that I know the intricacies of human rights laws, Ivan, and I'm sure that they can be complex, and I'm sure judges say, well, this is not about our opinion, it's about the law of the land, and if somebody isn't happy with it, change the law of the land. Don't have a go at the judge, don't have a go at people like you, Ivan. I understand that in principle, but I could take a pretty educated guess that being a child sex offender would and could preclude you from coming to the UK, whatever your judge-like qualifications might be. That must have been an option to them.
Well, common sense would say that. I think that's right. But you see, this is it. The judge will look at several criteria in deciding that balancing exercise. The judge will look at when the offence was committed. Was it a long time ago? Is there propensity? Is there a risk this individual will commit an offence now? The court decided there was no risk. The offence happened decades ago. And the court decided that the public are no longer at risk. Then you look at the family unit, which is a composite right. So it's not just Mr. Spence here, it's his British wife and his child as well. So when you look at the family unit as a whole, is it right that we should exclude a person who is not a risk to the public? The judge has made findings on that. And yet we still have to infringe the right to the family to be together. It's not a moral judgment. This is what the law's not about morality. The morality comes in when Parliament enacts the law. They debate it, they look at all of that, and they enact the law. The judges are not there to make moral decisions.
But if I look at cases where, in this country, somebody has been found guilty of a sex offence against a child, they usually be on a child sex offenders register for the rest of their life. They may not reoffend, and they may be very, very sorry and spent their life working for charities and trying to put wrongs right, etc. But they would be on that list, and you'd have to surely, whatever the case, I mean, this man has a wife and child in this country. I mean, that might be a red flag in itself. I mean, you say, well, they would have looked into all of this, but bearing in mind most judges will put a child sex offender on a register for life. What could have been so special about this person?
Well, that's a separate matter. We're talking about the right to the family to live in the UK. And he may well be on the sex offenders list. The US authorities no doubt will let the UK authorities know. And wherever this person lives, he may well have to give notice to the police station. If he wants to travel to another area or another country, he's got to seek permission. All of those protections will be put into place, no doubt. But we're talking about separating a human being from his wife and child who happen to be British. That British wife and child have a right for their partner, husband and father.
But he's but he's a sex offender. So I'm afraid that's not the argument then, is it? This is where the law is either wrong or you're wrong, Ivan, one of the two.
You see, this is it. You see, one point really I want to emphasise is that the proper way to look at this is not about whether he deserved to come to Britain. That's not the right question. The right question you should be asking is, did the judges perform the balancing exercise required by Article 8 and by Parliament and under the regulations of Article 8 of the European Convention? That's the question.
And now, I did acknowledge that if people are angry, change the law.
If you don't like it, change the law.
But I would take, again, I'll come back to what I said. I would take what I think it's an educated guess. I'm not a lawyer, but I think I've got this bit right, that if somebody is a child sex offender, then the option to preclude them based on that alone, whatever the other balances might say, would still be an option to that judge.
On that basis, anyone who commits a crime on serious crime should never be let out of prison. I'm afraid that's not the case. Article 8 protects your moral integrity. It protects your physical integrity, your moral integrity, and the right to be...
But nobody has ever... I mean, until the time that... And I know this does go to other subjects, but no one has ever solved paedophilia. They haven't been able to remove the gene that makes somebody instinctively attracted to a minor. That is forever a danger until somebody can solve it. So... it's right there, writ large, isn't it? There's the danger. So family life, he ain't got no right to a family life. Sadly for the poor person that was either duped or is OK with his criminal past, and the child, they're going to have to surrender that. The old man ain't coming home because he's a previous child sex offender. That's really easy to judge on that.
I recognise that, but this is it. We can only, the judges, and that's what we're talking about, did the judges get it right, can only apply the laws that they have on their desk at the time. Now, if we come out the European Convention, you can't argue Article 8. It won't be there. The judges won't look at that. And it may well be that something will replace that. If some particular parties get into power, they may well exclude people who've committed offences against children from ever coming to the UK. If that's the case, the judges will implement that.
But would you, as a lawyer, Ivan, you were obviously looking at, you know, literally the law, and I understand that, and sometimes our argument, as I've said a couple of times, it should be with the written law, not with the judge, etc. Judge can only implement guidelines and sentencing and decisions that are available. I get all of that, but it would still be curious, would it not, to look at a story such as this and not think that being a child sex offender would not automatically preclude you. That offence of all offences, if you were a shoplifter, if you used to nick cars, if you once set fire to, you know, your next door neighbour's garden shed, all of those things are terrible crimes too, but you can sort of understand this is in a very specific area of danger.
It is, but in my early years as a lawyer, I defended paedophiles. That's what I did. I was reviewing sentences as a lawyer, and I did that for a few years. And so I have a little bit of insight into this world, and it's more complex than you think. The background of these individuals, they themselves have been abused. Many of them were abused themselves. It's a bit more complex than simply saying, well, someone's a paedophile, and therefore they should be locked up in a box and the key thrown away.
Well, the point is they're probably always a paedophile. That's the problem. Even if we understand circumstances, even if we understand there is this curious pattern that, you know, not everybody, of course, who's been abused becomes an abuser. Most don't. But there is a bit of a pattern with some that do. Even if we allow for that, it doesn't alter the fact they're still a paedophile and therefore a danger.
Yeah, I mean, the court's made a decision on that point and has decided that this individual is no longer a danger. They were entitled to make that finding on the evidence presented to them. The government were entitled to present their evidence. They didn't persuade the judge. So I'm afraid the tribunal and the upper tribunal got it right. And even the Court of Appeal. The Court of Appeal didn't say exclude this man, Mr. Spence. What the Court of Appeal said, and that's the beauty of our appeal system, where it works properly, is they've said, OK, have another look at it. And no doubt there'll be perhaps more evidence put forward by the government to persuade the judge that this person is still a risk. But the judges can only look at the evidence before them. We weren't there. We didn't see it. It's hard to make judgments against these judges themselves. I think it's very difficult.
Ivan, thank you for your time. Always appreciated. Ivan Sampson giving us the legal, literally the legal determinations that are in consideration when these cases come around. He's an immigration lawyer. You might say, well, he's got skin in the game. Is it that? I think Ivan is, you know, objective enough to understand that it's not just about, well, you know, this is what I do for a living, so let anybody in regardless. I don't think he comes from that place, but I do think he comes from a place where lots of people within the world of law spend so long focusing on this kind of legalese, interesting interpretations, right to a family life. It was a long time ago. Until you could... Paedophilia is interesting. You can become a reformed shoplifter. You can become somebody who used to nick stuff out of boots on a regular basis and never did it again once they hit the age of 20. I've never heard of a reformed paedophile, somebody who has a sexual attraction to children. I think I'm right in saying that no psychologist, no organisation, no medic anywhere has ever been able to solve that that element, that proclivity that those people have. So until you're at that stage, anything else is sort of guesswork and fingers crossed, isn't it? Well, he hasn't done anything for 15 years, so therefore he's probably a good one. Well, is he? Clayton says, so surely his wife and child have the right to go to Jamaica? Yeah. I mean, that would be an option, one would assume. I don't know what his family setup is in terms of how that happened, how anybody ended up deciding that their partner, they were OK with their past paedophilia. Miranda is in Cumbria on this point of family life. Miranda, what have you got for us? Hello.
Hello. I think that the rights of the mum and the children aren't in any dispute. However, they are irrelevant in this situation. The judge made a decision, and essentially, a paedophile. The people who work with paedophiles, they say once a paedophile, always a paedophile, and essentially, how does the gentleman who was on before grade the paedophilia in this case? He go, oh well, he's going to be fine now. He's not going to do it again. How does he know he hasn't done it again already? It's absolutely insane, and it's basically the judge. Is it Judge? What's his name again? I can't remember it.
Greer.
His name.
Jonathan Greer.
Greer. But essentially, they interpret the law, and how the hell he's interpreted the law where he thinks that this man is safe. Make him live next door to him. Make him live next door to him. make him come and babysit his grandchildren if he's so sure, or his children, if he's so sure he will not commit this atrocious act again.
I'm trying to now put my Ivan Sampson hat on, the guy we just spoke to, Miranda. So if we discover, and if this is what the judge came up with, that the judge Greer looked at this and said, OK, there's a 15-year-old girl, and at the time he was 25 or something, and they were in some kind of relationship, 23, in some sort of... Does that change? Well, this is what the judge has got to consider. Is he a paedophile, or is he a guy that was dating a girl that was a year too young for the legal age?
It makes no difference, because if you say that that's okay...
It was apparently a one-night stand at a nightclub.
It makes no difference at all. He's broken the law.
No, I agree with you. I agree. I'm trying to work out what they're thinking, or he's thinking.
I mean, in nightclubs, you have to have an ID to get in anywhere.
Well, that would be that's often the defence, isn't it? Well, you know, I'm in a nightclub. If the girl's in a nightclub, she can only be 18 or 21. So how could I have broken the law? Or how did I know I was breaking the law?
You have to make sure, but then at that stage, he just seems like a predator, doesn't he?
Well, yes.
There's a definite difference between a 15-year-old and a 25-year-old anyway.
Agreed.
I mean, I have a 25-year-old daughter, and she is not the same as when she was 15.
Yeah.
Definitely not.
I bet you're glad about that as well.
Yeah. It's just unbelievable. And then you have to look at the grooming gangs again. If he makes that excuse for this situation, then he might make the excuse for any of those gentlemen who actually committed those atrocities too, and just say, oh, well, they didn't realise she was 15 or 14. It just makes a mockery of the whole thing.
It does indeed. Miranda, great call. Thank you very much indeed for that. We are talking about the law. We're talking about the right to family life. We're also talking about the BBC. One here says, so the BBC are not biased, according to you, Collins. You are as woke as hell. Go and join LBC. Yeah, I'm not sure that the person that wrote that actually believes any of that, bearing in mind I spent the first half an hour quoting God knows how many bias errors the BBC have committed, including the, if you like, the bullseye one of late, which is the Panorama documentary. And I don't believe anybody is that stupid, by the way, to have listened to the first 40 minutes and thought that. My point was that the idea that there's sort of a guideline, if you like, a set of guidelines run by the BBC, it also is slightly at odds with the amount of people that I've known that have worked in BBC who are anything but woke, left-wing and any of that stuff. In fact, the former head of BBC Politics, BBC Westminster, who's a mate of mine, went on to be Director of Communications for the Conservative government. Now, you can say the Conservatives ain't what they used to be, but I can tell you now, this person is not in any shape or form anyone that you would call woke. There's a couple of characters that work there in very senior positions right now in news. I can absolutely tell you that we'll be nudging more towards a kind of reformy sort of vote, or certainly the right of the Conservative Party. The point is, there's not an orchestrated right. These are the guidelines. Everybody do this. That would be mad, because anyone that works at the BBC, and there's tens and tens of thousands of them, would just, suddenly whistle blow, wouldn't they, on Twitter, if nowhere else, going, guess what I was asked to do? Guess what I was asked to cover up? I mean, it would be extraordinary if every single one of them was somehow cut from the same cloth as Yasmin Alabaya Brown or something. That would be bizarre. 0344 499 1000. This is Talk.
We've actually put up with half a century of being told that somehow our national flag is a symbol of oppression. Now, I think if Oxfordshire do this, they'll find themselves completely and utterly defied. People will literally just defy this. And you know what? If people have moved to this country and they don't like our flag, I've got a really simple idea. Go back to where you came from.
Do you ever fear about being arrested because of the socks you wear, Nigel Farage?
Well, I do. You want to see the underpants? Oh, dear, no.
There's the thought. Wow.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Sarah in London says, so a judge, quote, made findings that he was not a risk to the public. No, says Sarah, a judge decided he was not at risk. A judge would have made findings that this man was not a risk to the public before he sexually assaulted the child. But he didn't. Laws need changing. I don't care about balancing exercises. We need zero tolerance laws. If the family want to be with the child sex offender, they should go and live with him where he is, says Sarah. And I kind of agree. I think it's really hard to... And this is not a sensationalist, right-wing, kind of obvious, kind of a scattergun attack on somebody who's committed an offence and an immigrant. It's not that, is it? It's like, this is just logic. Someone's committed a sexual offence. If this was a white bloke, I think we would all feel the same. We feel the same when we discuss these horrendous cases, and we saw a very high-profile one of that week. I know this isn't in that ballpark, but nonetheless, he's been found guilty of a sexual assault of a teenager when she was 15 and he was in his mid-20s, I think it was. So that puts him as a no-no, surely, to anyone. 0344 499 1000. Let's go to Steve in Scunthorpe on this story. Steve, what have you got for us? Hi.
Good afternoon. I was told the first object of the government is to protect the people of the UK.
I'd have thought so, yeah.
So I thought that should have gone to the judges as well.
Yeah.
Now, if you look at that as a somebody who works in health and safety, say, what do you think they would say? If there's a risk, health and safety.
Well, that's a good point, because this person would presumably have to declare this conviction when applying for a job. So he wouldn't be able to work with children.
So, yeah.
Which might give the judge a clue as to the ridiculousness of the decision.
Yeah. I mean, health and safety say, minimum risk, put a hard hat on, drive at a certain speed, don't do this, don't climb a ladder without,
Yeah.
So that should apply. That should, we all stand by these laws, and I can't see why they should let him in. He's a danger.
Well, it's very, very strange when, and again, it comes back to this, Article 8 of the European Convention of Human Rights, which covers the right to private and family life. Now, the government did appeal this. The government, Yvette Cooper, when she was Home Secretary, appealed to the Upper Immigration Tribunal, but judges Madeleine Reeds and Nathan Moxon refused her arguments. The current Secretary, Shabana Mahmood, then brought a further case at the Court of Appeal. So successive Home Secretaries have tried to argue against this, but Judge Jonathan Greer waved him through. And you've made a really good point there, Steve. This person's got to then assimilate and get a job somewhere while declaring he's a paedophile.
That's right, yes. Yeah.
I don't know where that goes. Steve, thank you very much indeed for that. Kev says, Kev's in St Helens, I know this guy has a wife and child, but he wasn't thinking of them or being loyal to them when he was groping a child, was he? Yeah, and I don't know what his marital status was back then. And if he was married back then, it was in 2008. So that's 18 years ago. So his child, because you have this image in your head of a sort of little baby in a cradle, you know, needing its dad, that would be... If he had a child back then when he committed the offence, the kid's at least 18. So that kind of gets rid of that one, doesn't it? The right of the family life thing is curious. It seems to be grossly overused. Back on the issue of the BBC, Darren in Barnsley says, to be honest, we watch quite a bit of the BBC, but I have noticed and object to their inclusion of things like climate change, or even worse, climate emergency in programmes such as Bargain Hunt, to name just one example. There are others. How can you crowbar net zero into Bargain Hunt? I mean, seriously, that's how bad things have got. This one in from Betty. Every other country can refuse access if you've committed a crime. But, of course, you are allowed to appeal it through the European Convention of Human Rights. Steve says, on a slightly different subject, but extending tone... Oh, I think I read that one, didn't I? About films going down the woke route on the BBC programmes. Should there be a warning? I quite like it. What Steve also said was, time and time again, the BBC has proved to be biased in favour of the left. It is destroying itself. I would rather go to prison than ever pay the licence fee again. And it's almost impossible to come up with a reason to pay the licence fee. The old reason, back in the day, made a bit of sense because there was no competition, really. There was nothing else. There was... ITV had come along by that stage and latterly Channel 4... So it had it was expanding domestically, but the BBC was still able to sort of produce stuff that the others couldn't do. Their budgets were bigger. They had all the sport going on back then, remember? There was no Sky Sports. People said it couldn't be done outside the BBC, and then Sky got hold of it and made a much better job of what the BBC had done. They just made it a bigger thing. And that's not everybody's cup of tea, and the BBC were left and are still left with pretty much match of the day and a few World Cup matches, and that seems to be the order of events. So, but then once streaming came along, you could no longer make the argument that only the BBC can do it. And the only one you were ever left with, which is no argument at all, was a sort of a romantic one. Oh, it's part of us, you know, it's the BBC, Wogan, Parkinson, Starsky and Hutch, all the greats, Strictly, if you like, that, Only Fools and Horses, Morecambe and Wise. You could go through those, and to some people that resonates, but it's not... you know, if you were sitting there in a courtroom and said, these are my arguments in favour of the BBC, the judge would say, well, it's very nice. They're very nice, cosy arguments, but I'm afraid they don't really stand the test of any sort of scrutiny. It doesn't make much sense in today's world. So, therefore, you're left with only really a commercial, financial argument about it. Do you want it at all? And if you do, how much are you willing to pay for it? And do you test that by making it and putting it on an exact equal footing as Netflix or as Disney and Apple and all of the others? That's the only argument. I can't genuinely, objectively, can't think of how else you could frame this debate other than that. The nearest I've ever heard is somebody say, right, you put the news and current affairs. It becomes a news and current affairs channel, and that is all. It is scrutinised to its bones on impartiality, And so therefore you have a country that pays for a news organisation that is not subject to sponsorship or any other commercial imperative or persuasion. That would be the argument. And therefore you'd be paying about 20 quid a year or something for that, I would guess. But even that would you pay for? 0344 499 1000. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Sean makes an interesting point. He says, my wife worked with a woman who married a Turkish man. The financial, employment and other criteria they had to satisfy for him to live here was off the scale. Perhaps he should have just committed a sex offence against a child and they'd have waved him through instead, says Sean. And that's the bit, thank you, Sean, but that's the bit I don't understand about this fellow that's been allowed to come to the country. I mean, it just seems utterly extraordinary that all of the other tests that anyone else would have to go through, do they just get ignored? Or even after you've gone through the right to a family life, do you not then have to go through all the other tests that Sean is referring to? Now, let's have a little focus on last night's game. It was, I think, a beauty. There were a few little moments that need a bit of a tweak. I think we can all agree with that. But it was a convincing 4-2 win to England. Kane scoring twice. The defence could have been better. Apparently Tuchel was furious. Certainly there was all talks of some incredible pasting down at half-time. But 3 points are 3 points. Keir Starmer is already talking about a bank holiday. No pressure. Let's speak with Paul Stewart, former England international footballer, notably, of course, former City, Spurs, Liverpool and Sunderland. But never, ever did you darken the doorstep of Stamford Bridge, Paul, which bothers me greatly, but I'll park that to one side for the benefit of us having a chat. Lovely to have you with us, firstly. Your assessment, then, as a former pro on last night, what did you make of it?
Well, I think the first half, as everybody saw, I don't think whilst we went in front, I don't think we were really the team that we were in the second half. It's really heartening to hear what Tuchel's halftime talk was like. You know, for once, it wasn't about tactics and stopping other teams scoring. It was about have that confidence, go out and show what you can do, be brave. And I think, you know, at present, you know, it's a tough world out there, Ian, and let's get behind the team.
Yeah.
We need a bit of brightness in our lives, don't we? And
we do.
The second half certainly showed that. You know, Bellingham going straight up the Croatia end and scoring.
Well, it was like he just come straight out of that team talk with Tuchel's voice still in his ear, wasn't it? And off he went. Bang.
Yes,
there was no hanging around there.
Very much.
Yeah.
Very much so. And you know, we can talk about the defensive frailties, you know, and sort of highlight them, but I'd rather talk about, you know, Bellingham's goal, Harry Kane's 2 goals, moreover, introducing Saka Rashford, and them still looking fresh. You know, world quality players on the bench coming on and looking like they're ready to play. So, without getting too excited about it, because we've done that in the past, Ian, haven't we? We've got overexcited.
Yeah,
I'm quietly confident that they'll certainly get out of the group, and hopefully they'll with Harry at the top of his game.
Yeah.
They'll grow in confidence, and you know, we'll all hope for a great summer.
It's interesting. When I was telling one of my colleagues here at Talk, when Harry Kane scores, I'm disappointed when Harry scores with his feet. It's like I feel shortchanged. I want that man to be heads all round. And I know what we saw there with that wonderful corner from Rice was, you know, it was textbook set piece stuff. How he wasn't marked at that point is just a flipping Croatian mystery. And I'm sure there's a Croatian phone-in going on at the moment discussing exactly that. Never happened again, did it, on any future corner after that? But even though, you know, he does this in his sleep, the skill required for that and the geometry that's required, the speed and the concentration and the overall skill is utterly breathtaking.
And you're right, Ian. And you know what Harry brings to the table, you know, the leadership. He reminds me an awful lot, and I know he equaled Gary Lineker's record, but he reminds me an awful lot of Gary, you know. They're not big talkers on the pitch. They're not big talkers in the changing room. What they do is they show how good they are on the field of play and their conduct, and it makes them great leaders without having to shout and do an awful lot of talking. Because you can imagine all the children in the UK now looking up, and when they play at school at break time, they'll all want to be Harry Kane, and they'll all want to score goals. And I think he's a great captain for the country and a great leader by what he does on the pitch.
Yeah, 100%. What is also utterly mesmerising is, I know they've had a couple of warm-ups and friendlies, but what is extraordinary, it doesn't happen anywhere else in a game of football, in league, etc. There's a team that has never actually played together before, not in its full glory. And you look at that, and you know, many of them wouldn't even know each other that well. I mean, there must have been some players that were looking at Harry Kane going, "Oh, I remember you at Spurs," but we've never actually met. I mean, obviously they've trained together, and they, but you take my point, Paul. That takes another kind of skill set at international level. That you're coming together. Your domestic team, you do it week in, week out, training ground every day of the week. But for a match like that, this is new territory.
And I like you and a lot of people that I spoke to leading up to the tournament, you know, there was nothing that really showed us that we were going to have that 4-2 thrashing last night. Was it 1-1 against New Zealand or 1-0? There wasn't really anything to say we're going to go to the World Cup and really show that we're contenders. And like you say, it's not like they've played together week in, week out like they do at club football. But these quality players, and it looks like the manager is bringing something different to the table, which feels that way, we haven't had before, have we? We've got excited, but just that speech that keeps getting played over and over, you know, go out there, enjoy it, you know, do what you can do as an England footballer. That's why you're here, be brave. And you know what? I haven't heard that said for a long time, and hopefully inspires the team continually to go out and do that, because if they play without fear, we've got 22 players there that can match any team in the world.
Absolutely right. I'll tell you what, just a word on Croatia. I know their keeper ultimately let 4 goals in, but frankly, in the first section of that second half, whatever they're paying him, double it, because man alive, it was like he was playing on his own at one point.
It was, wasn't it? It was like ping ball or ping pong ball. It kept coming out and he kept saving it. And do you know what? You get to that stage where you think, oh, not England, it's not going to happen again, is it? And I was just so pleased that the team came out with a different sort of energy and different aspect to looking at the game and the way they play. And
when you look
great
at,
to watch.
yeah, absolutely. When you look at the day before that, I've lost track now, but where, you know, France's first game, they had a bit of an iffy first half, of course, but then really put the booster rockets on the second half. I was thinking about that because I was, you know, France, you know, every one of them pretty much a superstar, and you're looking at that and thinking, wow. And then I look at England's performance in the second half, which was impressive, but ultimately they are up. That you can see what they're sort of up against down the line potentially.
But listen, you've got, you know, to win these major championships, you've got to come across teams like France and the Argentinas who are used to being at that level and in finals. And you know, we've always been the bride, haven't we? Really,
True.
Never, or the bridesmaid, never the bride.
Yeah.
I think this time, I'm sure that the quality, and I'm sure personally, I think we've got a squad of players that can match any of the other countries. And that's why I hope that Thomas doesn't change the way he asks the players to play each game, with the attitude, with that real guile to win.
Yeah, and it really was a guile to win, wasn't it? Paul, great to have you on, sir. Thank you. Enjoy the rest of the tournament. And maybe we'll speak again before this is over as well. Paul Stewart, former England international, former City, Spurs, Liverpool and Sunderland. Thank you to him. It was extraordinary. It will be extraordinary. Everything about it is extraordinary. When you think this is not a team you play with week in, week out, that's weird. These are not players you necessarily know very intimately. You're going to have players. There's players in the England side who are going to meet, you know, maybe meet Argentina at some point down the line. And someone like Messi, how old's Messi now? Messi's 38, I think. Ronaldo, I think, is 41. But they're going to be, some of the players, some of our players were kids watching Messi play football. I mean, you'd be almost thinking, do I ask for an autograph just before I take a corner? There'll be those moments of, you know, you've got to let all of that go. As we said yesterday, we were talking to Geraint Anderson about the psychology of players, a bit of a kind of killer instinct. In fact, I think Geraint called it correct yesterday when he said he felt Thomas Tuchel had that about him. I didn't much feel like that about Tuchel when he was at Chelsea, by the way, but there was a sense, and I know we're one game in, and, you know, everyone can get too excited and things can go, you know, France will have a stinker at some point. You know, it's never plain sailing for everybody. And there's always moments when you think, wow, couldn't have written that before it happened. But we will watch with interest. But in the meantime, we have Scotland, we have England, and both winning their first matches. That's all at this stage, you literally cannot ask for more. So great night of football, more to come. Let's speak to Henry down in Brighton. Back to the BBC. Henry, what have you got for us? Hi.
Hi, Ian. Long time no speak.
Yeah, far away.
Yeah. Well, I mean, as I told your researcher, to look at the future of something, you kind of got to look at the past, haven't you?
Mm-hmm.
And I was born in 1974, so I vaguely remember the detail and all of the institutions that you mentioned, things like Blackadder, and I remember in the 90s Red Dwarf, you know, and all these great things that the BBC did. But at some point they got, I mean, at some point I think they've always been captured, but you know, they got captured by the, and the other thing they started doing, you know, I remember the BBC News. I'm sure it used to report on you know, a sort of variety of things, and certain things obviously would be given more airtime depending on interest, whatever. But then they started doing this thing where they'd just like hit something for weeks, you know, and started trying to change the Overton window, you know, the whole zeitgeist, if you like, of the country by feeding us crap. And
do you mean in their news?
Yes, their news, and then you got presenters. You know, my heroes. Actually, David Attenborough, absolute hero of mine. I think that climate change is a massive grift, and I disagree with him there. But still, you know, he turned down a very high-paying job to go off and film the world and its animals.
Went off like Charles Darwin, didn't he? And then came back with an 80-year career.
Yeah, and you know, so but then we go into the. I mean, my heroes as a child: Rolf Harris, Jimmy Savile. You know, and if it happened in the past and it had changed, and this is why I'm talking about the future, it hasn't changed. In fact, if anything, it's
But is that, you know, and I say, I mean, goodness me, I mean, you've mentioned two obvious cases that are the darkest of shadows. But of course, I mean, Jimmy Savile was very much associated with the BBC. Rolf Harris was as well. I saw somebody write that Rolf Harris worked more for other stations in his career than he ever... Well, I don't know if you add up the hours. I mean, he did that cartoon programme, didn't he?
Sure, yeah.
And all of that. But that was the BBC. I think of Rolf Harris being BBC, but then at the time, I suppose there was only the BBC, really, wasn't there? There was, you know, there was certainly 3 or 4 channels. So the BBC, the fact that people that were good or bad mostly worked at the BBC would be no kind of strange fact, I guess.
Yes, yeah, and another thing is the nepotism. And now, I'm not going to name drop, but my auntie married quite a big personality who worked for the BBC, and I kind of got a bit of an insight into what it did to their lives and how it changed. I think it changed my auntie. Anyway, that's on the side.
Are you allowed to say who that is?
I can't. I'm not going to.
Okay. We'll just ask you off air and pay you lots of money.
Well, I'll say Jeremy Clark. I'll say Jeremy Clarkson being he's on the news today, and that also he married my auntie Francie. But I don't want, you know.
No, that's fine. Yeah. Well, we certainly wish Jeremy Clarkson well. That's for sure.
Absolutely. He took the jab and he kind of pushed it a bit and. Maybe it's come back. I don't know, but there's.
I don't think anybody's saying that seriously. But
no.
You're now in a whole different. You know, it's not the Alex Jones show.
no. But anyway, I don't want to hark back to those dark days. And I've got a friend who left journalism. She became a yoga instructor because it broke her, but she had much to do with BBC personalities, and some of the stories she told me, you know, about some of the, especially the EastEnders stars and cocaine, and you know, and some of the, and I'm a recovering addict, so I've kind of been around cocaine, and I can tell you some of the presenters are on cocaine, even still today. And then you had the child, like BBC presenters back in the day, didn't you, with cocaine allegations and...
Yeah, I don't know if... I mean, Richard Bacon was the one that was always, you know... I don't think he was doing it while he was making stuff out of squeezy bottles and bog rolls, but I think he'd been partying, hadn't he? And lost his job for it, of course.
Yes, and you know what? Fair's fair, but if you bring your company, it's the same with me.
Yeah.
If I can do what I like outside of work, but if I bring my company into public disrepute, I'm going to get dragged over the coals and binned. And that's that.
Absolutely right. Absolutely right. It is. I mean, the curious. My experience when I was working for them, Henry, and it wasn't for a long period of time, but in radio, and then at times when I was. Just kind of doing guest stuff on politics shows and that kind of thing. The thing that always came through to me is that they were overstaffed and way too big. That was, to me, my biggest... I wouldn't even say criticisms. It was just very odd when I'd be booked to be a guest on a politics programme, and it invariably involved somebody ringing you up the day before and interviewing you for about 2 hours about what your views were on a whole load of things, most of which would never come up, but they were just covering their backside in... And I thought, you're literally paying somebody to do this kind of thing. So it was more about that, to me, that I just thought it was exhausting, the process and the size of teams. And I know that, you know, you sometimes need bigger teams than you might get in the commercial world, where they often do the very opposite, and they have 2 people doing a job that should be done by 10. But the BBC, you know, had 30 people doing a job that should be done by 8. So that was my takeaway. Listen, Henry, lovely to talk. Thank you very much indeed for that. Great call. 0344 499 1000. We'll have more calls, comments from you on the way. 10 to 3. This is Talk.
We've actually put up with half a century of being told that somehow our national flag is a symbol of oppression. Now, I think if Oxfordshire do this, they'll find themselves completely and utterly defied. People will literally just defy this. And you know what? If people have moved to this country and they don't like our flag, I've got a really simple idea. Go back to where you came from.
Do you ever fear about being arrested because of the socks you wear, Nigel Farage?
Well, I do. You want to see the underpants? Oh, dear, no.
There's a thought. Wow.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
We're going to be back on the phones in just a second. 5 to 3, don't go away. Matt, Voice of Doom, day 3, brand new voice, mystery voice. You're looking for someone who's a politician or political in some obvious kind of way. Male, female, left wing, right wing, dead or alive. It could be any of those. The simple task is tell us who this is.
Any of the noble aspirations.
It's a tough one, but we're only on day 3, so we've never beaten the record of 21 days, because if it doesn't get one today, it rolls over to tomorrow. Here it is again.
Any of the noble aspirations.
And again.
Any of the noble aspirations.
It is not Harriet Harman, as a couple of people guessed yesterday. If you think you do know, 87222 is the only way to have a crack at this. 87222, if you can tell us who this is.
Any of the noble aspirations.
And we'll give you the answer after the news, only if somebody gets it correct. If not, it's back tomorrow. This is Matt in Cheshire. On the BBC, Matt, what have you got for us? Hi.
Hi, good afternoon, Ian.
Afternoon.
I ring the BBC fairly regularly to make complaints about their political programming.
Do you? That's good. Who do you talk to when you ring? Do you get through to Fiona Bruce or something?
No, unfortunately. You get through to like a call centre in Northern Ireland.
Okay.
And pretty much everybody is in Northern Ireland, and most of them have obvious right-wing views, but just happen to be in Northern Ireland.
Right.
So I record daily politics maybe 2 or 3 times a week, and I still record Question Time.
Yeah.
Not because I'm an avid viewer. I just want to see where they're at still, if you like, just to see, evidence of the bias. And this week, there have been 2 episodes of Politics Live at lunchtime, where they had a Labour MP, George Monbiot, who's obviously a Guardian.
The Guardian,
yeah,
journalist.
And I think the other one was like a Tory centrist.
Yeah.
So out of the 4 people on the programme, including the BBC host, you've not got a single sort of person representing the public's views.
The way they do that is over the course of a week or 2. So the representation doesn't always have to happen on a single programme. It can happen over a period of time. And, of course, the BBC are constantly, by the left, being criticised because the person they have on more than anyone else on Question Time is Nigel Farage. So they stand accused from both angles, if you like, Matt.
Yeah, but the day before, that lineup was an even more biased lineup. So you had 8 guests. 3 guests in 2 days, no reform, no restore, not even a really right-wing Tory, like a centrist Tory. So basically all you're getting is an echo chamber for Guardian readers and the BBC.
Was there a row? The only reason there is always the possibility, and I'm just trying to think of their side of this kind of thing, it's only because I've known too many people over the years who've done those booking jobs, and it's an absolute flipping nightmare. And you can ring 30 MPs and not get a single yes. And it's quite possible you're ringing, Restore probably wouldn't make the cut on that programme just yet, but it's possible out of the Reform MPs, none of them either wanted to do it or were available to do it.
Then you should take it off air because the format is completely obsolete if you're just basically having the same people.
But if the following week you balance it out, does that achieve the aim of impartiality?
No, it's not good enough here. Every day
Okay.
it should. You say you had Rupert Lowe, Jeremy Corbyn, and Priti Patel. That would be some balance.
Yeah, and I tell you what, most bookers would die for that format on a daily basis. Matt, I've got to stop. The news is upon us. 3 o'clock now. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is Talk, 0344 499 1000. We are talking about the BBC. Great call from Matt just before the news as well. Axing jobs, cutting back on money. But it ain't really just about that over there at the Beeb. It's not just about, there is loads of money there. They're one of the greatest exporters of programmes, the biggest on the planet. Their back catalogue is absolutely huge. It's about whether or not they have a relevance anymore. I said at the beginning, the BBC's challenge isn't about surviving. It's persuading people it still deserves to survive. Where do you stand on that? And if you do support it, I find it really hard to find a cogent argument as to how you could sell the BBC. If you do, what form should it take? More on that coming up, and your thoughts. Also this afternoon, Oxfordshire's Liberal Democrat Council is seeking a High Court injunction to ban St George's flags near public highways. They're threatening 2 years in jail. These people are ill. They literally have something wrong with them. But if they really believe you should go to jail for putting a flag on a railing, you have something wrong with you. More on that, and of course your responses and comments on England's convincing win against Croatia last night. It was their opening match and it was a beauty. 4-2, and Harry Kane equalising Lineker's record of 10 World Cup goals. There were moments of concern, bit of frailty in defence, and apparently a bit of a clash between Tuchel, the manager, and Jordan Pickford, the keeper. Thoughts on all of that as well. 0344 499 1000. Lots of comments to come through, and we'll get back to yours in a few moments' time. I do want to just take a moment to talk about Donald Trump and, of course, the Iran deal that he has signed. Signed this in Versailles last night. Sanctions lifted, oil flowing, stocks up. But the Iranians who took to the streets, risking their lives back at the beginning of the year, were not protesting for cheaper oil. They wanted freedom. They wanted regime change. Has Trump really ended a war, or simply propped up the regime that actually started it? Let's speak to Potkin Azamir, British-Iranian journalist, senior fellow, investigative project on terrorism. Potkin, good afternoon. Nice to have you with us again. Here's the bit that concerned me, and maybe you can tell me whether I'm right or wrong on this one. I keep hearing Donald Trump say things like, this regime, it's so much better than the old regime. These guys know what they're doing and they're up for a deal, etc. Two things that I took away from that was, number one, I didn't think there was meant to be a deal at the beginning of all of this. This wasn't really about carving out a deal with anyone. But secondly, this new regime does have quite a lot of echoes to the old regime, particularly the fella in charge, who's literally the son of the last guy in charge. Good afternoon to you. Nice to have you with us.
Good afternoon, Ian. Look, I can understand that a lot of the opponents of the regime may be despondent. I can understand people that sympathise with the Iranians who came under street, like yourself, like myself, may be despondent by this memorandum of understanding. And it looks like a lot of concessions have been given to the Islamic Republic of Iran and not much gained. But let's not forget, at the end of the day, this is not a deal. This is an MOU. It's a memorandum of understanding. It's not a treaty or agreement. Mm-hmm. It's less binding and it's more limited than a treaty. The truth is that both sides needed a break. They needed a respite from the conflict. Now, I think the audience watching the show at the moment, they understand the American and its Western allied side of it when I say they need the respite. But also the regime desperately needed a break because you mentioned the son of the previous leader. He hasn't been seen since the war began.
Yeah, I don't think he's in very good condition from everything we know, if that makes sense.
We don't even know if he's alive, to be honest with you, Ian, because look, there hasn't been a video of him, there hasn't been an audio of him, there hasn't even been a handwritten note from him. Yeah. And they needed to bury the previous supreme leader, his father, Ali Khamenei. They're going to do that in the coming days of July to coincide with the Holy Shiite month of Muharram. During that funeral, they have to show Mujtaba Khamenei. If he doesn't even show up in his father's funeral, there's going to be more pressure on whoever is ruling Iran at the moment as to where he is and how come all these statements are coming, saying that, these are on behalf of the new leader, but no one knows where he is and he doesn't even turn up for his father's funeral. Yeah. And there's very deep problems within the regime that has exasperated after the war. I remember the last time I talked to you, Ian, I was saying that the Achilles heel of the regime is economy. Look, They're very good at war. They're very good at conflict. They're very good at putting down protests and repression. They love crisis. Their Achilles heel is the economy and the peacetime management of Iran.
Yeah.
Now, imagine the shape that the economy of Iran was before the war, when we last spoke, and where it is now. I mean, look, 25% of the infrastructure has been destroyed. And that's not me saying it. That is a regime, an insider expert who said it on the state's affiliated media platform, said it, that 25% of the infrastructure is destroyed. They're going to have serious energy problems. So there's a 60 days time limit to this memorandum of understanding. Who knows what's going to happen in the 60 days, up to that 60 days, and who knows what's going to happen after that 60 days. So let's not be too despondent. The regime has got very, very serious problems that are going to be exacerbated after the war.
There will be many people, understandably, Potkin, looking at what happened at the beginning of the year. Potentially 40,000 people lost their lives at the hands of that regime. There was a view at that time from some who were very enthusiastic and hopeful that Iran was literally about to change. Pahlavi waiting in the wings to take control, a more secular country. That's how it was. That's what many people were hoping for. This arrangement, whatever we want to call it, between the Iranians and Trump, doesn't appear to be doing any of that. And what does it say for those 40,000 that lost their lives?
Yeah, I think the Iranian opposition, especially the Iranian opposition outside Iran, always get a bit too enthusiastic every time there is an uprising in Iran, thinking that the regime is going to collapse tomorrow. And they start promising all these things about who's going to come to power, etc., etc. But I think what we should learn from the 5 major uprisings that have happened in Iran in the last 20 years is that it's better to go concession by concession, rather than sort of like thinking, right, this is it, tomorrow the regime is going to collapse. Let's get concession by concession. This is exactly what happened in the 1979 Islamic Revolution. They weren't chanting death to the Shah right from the beginning.
Yeah.
They got concession at a time from the previous regime, up to a point where they looked back and they thought, right, we've given all the concessions, we've released all the political prisoners, all the terrorists from prisons, and we've given all the concessions that the revolutionaries want. The Shah has apologized on state TV, saying that I've heard the voice of your revolution. And then it was too late for the regime to resist. And so we have to look at this in a long-term view, that the regime is getting weaker and weaker, and its support is getting less and less. In fact, this time it's had to rely on its support, not so much inside Iran, but outside Iran. The fanatical Shia population outside Iran who look at the Islamic Republic as a shelter for themselves. And this manifested itself in Iran bringing 15,000 of its Shia proxies from Iraq to man the checkpoints to make sure there's no more protests during the war. So, let's not look at this as sort of like, right now the regime has survived. And that's exactly the narrative that the regime is saying. Because they survived, they say they're victorious. They have survived, but they're not victorious.
Do you think then, Potkin, from what you're saying, that this regime is likely to sort of naturally implode? Is that what you're suggesting here?
I think so, because look, at the end of the day, this is an archaic regime. This is a regime which is not compatible with, this time and age. And I've always likened it to the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union didn't collapse by people coming on the streets to protest and overthrow it.
Sure.
The Soviet regime just collapsed because it just couldn't cope with the demands of the society. And all these underlying reasons why the protests happen, and they haven't gone away. Even, within this 60 days, even if money is injected into the regime, it still doesn't, because the institutional corruption that's within the regime, it still doesn't mean that the regime is going to make things well for everyone. So, let's not get too despondent. This is just a memorandum of understanding. It's not a treaty. It's less binding and it's more limited. And, let's come back again within, next 60 days and see where we are.
I mean, back to what many people thought then at the beginning of all of this, that this was going to be a revolution that looked as if something was about to give, and it never really did. Are we going to see the exiled crown prince back in Iran, running the show? Will it look like this secular country that many people have craved? What is there a timeline you could even put on that?
Totalitarian regimes are difficult to overthrow with a revolution. It's like, you know, the Khmer Rouge in Cambodia. You couldn't overthrow with a revolution. You couldn't overthrow the Nazis in Germany with a revolution. Totalitarian regimes either evolve or they implode. And I've always said street violence is their playing field. You know, they're very good at violence. The ordinary Iranian people can never match the violence of the regime. So when it comes to trying to overthrow the regime with street protests, it's always going to be difficult. But look, don't write off any of the alternative that we've just mentioned. Still anything is possible, because the underlying problems between the regime and the people hasn't gone away. The people of Iran are pro-Western people that want a secular country. They're fed up with all these restrictions that they have on their personal lifestyle, etc., etc. And none of these underlying reasons have gone away because of this MOU.
Well, we will speak again, Potkin. It's always enlightening to speak with you and get your take on these things. Thank you for your time. Potkin Azamir, British-Iranian journalist, senior fellow at the Investigative Project on Terrorism. Thank you to him. There's a lot in that. So, overarching headline, I think, is that this will happen, but it will happen more organically rather than some chronology that you could set out now. A week on Tuesday, new regime. A week on Thursday, X, Y, Z. I hear what he's saying. It's his area of expertise. Your responses to that as well. Loads of comment on a whole range of stuff here. This comes from Amanda, who says, England flags upsetting people. How about the feelings of Jewish people surrounded by Palestinian flags? Two-tier feelings. Great phrase, says Amanda. Well, that's my... completely agree with Amanda. I honestly don't think that this Liberal Democrat Council and was the other one a Green Council, that one in Bristol? Possibly. I don't think they would be making these decisions if it was about pride flags or Palestinian flags that had gone up. Genuinely. No, scrap that. I know they wouldn't have been having this argument. If suddenly people had thought, right, it's Pride Month, let's go big on the flags. Hang them from railings outside Robert Dias or in the park fountain, anywhere you like. There's no way the Green Party would go, this is an outrage, we don't want this, get them down, set fire to the pride flag. Would never happen at all. This is about St George's flags. It's as simple and as straightforward as that. Fran says, chalkboard, Ian, don't you mean blackboard, or is it made of chalk? Did I say chalkboard? I think I said chalkboard because that's how it's referred to, isn't it, on ITV, over at here's Emma at the chalkboard. Well, they are the same thing, but one is seen as being politically correct because you say chalkboard and not blackboard. Blackboard was offensive, although it's mostly kind of whiteboards now at school. I don't even think there's a blackboard in my kids' school. Did you have blackboards in your school, Finn? And interactive as well. So even though Finn's about 7 years old, he remembers the whole interactive stuff. Do you know what my son was telling me the other day? He was having his geography lessons. You know when a teacher is... Do you remember that every now and again a teacher would be off and the head teacher would take the lesson once in a while? You go, oh, my God. So they've been having the head teacher for geography. And he finishes off the lesson with showing them some YouTube videos. I don't mean like the best of Bonnie Blue. I'm talking like stuff pertaining to the... well, at least not that I know of. Pertaining to, the subject. And the point is, it kind of... I mean, these are like 5-minute mini documentaries that you would find on a geography channel on YouTube. Bite-sized pieces designed and produced properly for the education of kids. And I thought, wow. My memory of specifically my geography teacher is that he used to write, as did the history teacher, in the adjoining classroom, and they were mates, is they would write lots manually by hand on a blackboard in very neat writing, which I always thought was both impressive and disturbing, like a kind of weird superpower. I mean, it was... And you had to copy the words, basically. So you had to read the blackboard and copy the words. And it was one of those blackboards that was on a runner And when you'd finished it, the teacher would go, "Is everybody done? Everybody copied that? Right." And they'd pull the board down. There'd be another one there. Now do this. 200 words on Henry VIII's codpiece collection, or whatever it happened to be. So I think lessons are probably a bit more interesting. I don't know whether that's because of the demise of the blackboard, but the interactive stuff that is shown now is kind of in a whole new league. 03444. So I apologise to Fran, by the way, and others. Apparently I said chalkboard, because the board's not made of chalk. That's the distinction between the two. But the chalk is chalk, of course. I hate chalk. 03444. I don't even know where I'm going with this. I think it was the noise of it on the blackboard, wasn't it? It was the flipping noise of that stuff. It was never good. Whereas your whiteboard, obviously, you're in Premier League territory there. And then, of course, how do you possibly compete with a selection of YouTube videos, YouTube shorts at the end? 0344 499 1000. This one from Mark in Staffordshire says, if the judge, this is about the fella that's a sex offender that was allowed to come into the UK despite having committing a sexual assault on a 15-year-old. If judges can overrule the government's wishes, the government can change the law overnight. Just comes down to will. Also, it really gets my goat how pompous the lawyer sounds just because they've swallowed a dictionary, says Mark in Staffordshire. They do get you on that a little bit. Well, I'm a lawyer, so therefore. Well, yes, you are a view, and I will respect your view. You're just not the only view. Lines are open, 3:20. This is Talk.
We've actually put up with half a century of being told that somehow our national flag is a symbol of oppression. Now, I think if Oxfordshire do this, they'll find themselves completely and utterly defied. People will literally just defy this. And you know what? If people have moved to this country and they don't like our flag, I've got a really simple idea. Go back to where you came from.
Do you ever fear about being arrested because of the socks you wear, Nigel Farage?
Well, I do. You want to see the underpants? Oh, dear, no.
There's the thought. Thank you.
Wow. Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is Talk. 0344 499 1000. Right, before we go any further, we forgot to do this in the last section. We were so busy with stuff. That is the Voice of Doom, day 3. So remember, this is the voice we played you.
Any of the noble aspirations.
So, simple question, who is that? These are some of the guesses. Jared Krishna, Mike Johnson, Glenda Jackson. Strange enough, no. Colin Powell. Why was he Colin and not Colin? Nobody ever answered that question. I don't think anyone dared to ask him. Is it just an American thing? Neville Chamberlain, strangely enough it isn't. Chuck Schumer, J.D. Vance, Dick Cheney, Al Gore, John Hume, Bill Clinton, Henry Kissinger, Ronald Reagan, Martin McGuinness. All wrong. We don't have a right answer, so it rolls over to tomorrow for day 4. Good luck with that. Tim is in Hartlepool. Tim, the BBC and all associated with it, what have you got for us? Afternoon.
Well, hi there. To me, Ian, it comes down to one simple premise or principle, which is consumer choice. And I just feel entirely that, especially in this day and age of consumerism with streaming channels, it's all about consumer choice. And you've got to win that choice, I think.
Yeah.
And I mentioned earlier that do they deserve people to make that choice? Well, me personally, I just want the freedom to buy whatever I want with the £17, and it might be to buy a license, or it might be to have Netflix or Disney Channel or HBO or Apple, any of the things that I could choose. I want to retain the right to do that and not feel like I'm getting threatened legally if I don't buy a consumer product.
And it's really, I can't see how anyone can create an argument against that. I mean, it's all, in fact, I'm confident enough to say, Tim, it's impossible to create an argument against that. Because, you know, it's a state tax, right, that you have to pay. And if you're watching other stuff, or you want at least the choice, I'm out. I can't think of counter-arguments to what you've just said.
Yeah, well, I haven't been able to either. I don't actually believe that anyone should be forced into buying a product that they don't want to buy. And I'm struggling to think of what product you'd have to buy other than utility. But then you have a choice of a whole range of suppliers for that. So, yeah.
Do you need, I don't know how to put this really without sounding, well, it's not for me. This would be the argument some people would make. The BBC can make more intelligent programmes that other channels don't need to make. So Channel 4 make Naked Attraction, which essentially is just a way to show people's willies and front bottoms live on telly. The BBC wouldn't do that, but if you allowed everyone to their own devices, you'd have more programmes like Naked Attraction and less programmes like The Blue Planet.
Well, yeah. I mean, there are certain products that the BBC produce that are undeniably amazing. But again, you should be able to make the choice to buy those. Yeah. And for me, at the end of the day, you have to have that choice.
And that's it, though, isn't it? I mean, it's a strange work. But again, you're right. It's choice, ultimately. If they decided, the BBC decided they were going to do a new programme on a Friday night called The Penis Show, and it was just going to be sort of weird jokes about willies, and sometimes they would show wonky ones and and all of that, then it would probably get more viewers than Question Time. Now, is it therefore reasonable, or is it just a bit aloof and snobby, Tim, to say, well, how terrible we've arrived in a world where more people want to watch a programme called The Willy Show than they do Question Time. I've picked a bad example, Question Time, because you often see quite a lot of willies on Question Time, but that's another story. But you take the point. It's where the market is. And if the market has a greater audience in Tosh, you know, like the TikTok kind of way of doing business, do we need a BBC to protect us against that?
Well, again, if they make a good quality programme that people think is a good product to buy, then yeah. But I mean, this will upset a lot of people, I guess. But for me, Strictly Come Dancing is, and going back to your Willy Show, they did make this programme called Strictly Come Dancing. But anyway, I've never watched that and never will, because I just find it silly.
There's also an argument that Strictly Come Dancing isn't a programme the BBC should be making if they are of this belief that they make stuff that others can't. I mean, that's an ITV show right there. But they've made it because years ago there was back in I think the 50s, there was a Strictly Ballroom programme, and it's become an evolution of that. And now it makes them millions of pounds around the world because they sell not only the format but the actual version of the British show.
Absolutely. And a couple of things more recently where we hear they're going to spend up to $1 billion on buying, is it Suits with
Meghan Markle?
Meghan Markle. And
are they still making that thing, Suits?
I don't know if they're still making it.
Because if they're thinking of buying that, it's surely 20 years old.
Yes, exactly. And there's other programs that they are thinking of buying that I watched years ago on Netflix that I paid to watch. So now I'm supposed to pay again to watch them.
And that's the difference, isn't it? Every now and again, you know that thing when you sit down and you think, oh, this looks like a good documentary on Netflix, and you give it 15 minutes and it's rubbish. But you're always left with the view that, well, it was my choice to pay for this. You know, I made that error. Most Netflix watching seems to come through recommendations, doesn't it? But you can forgive it more. But if the BBC get it wrong, we have a right to be... You're not going to like everything, obviously. You have a right to have... You know, we've got a view in it because we've got skin in the game, because we all own it.
Sure, and that's the kernel of the problem, is we shouldn't have to all own something unless we all decide we want to.
Yeah, it's a tricky one, isn't it? Again, I think you come up with powerful and persuasive, unarguable points, Tim. Simple as that. Thank you, mate. Have a lovely weekend. That's Tim in Hartlepool. I said that like it was a Friday. It was only a Thursday. Big show tomorrow, by the way. I can't even tell you why it's a big show tomorrow, but you can guess why it's a big show tomorrow. We're talking about the BBC, among other things. Let's get a voice note on this very point. It comes from Jez.
The BBC burying the truth. They bury the truth all the time. Whether that's done at sort of editorial level or where it's done sort of institutionally. The Muslim Pakistani rape gangs would be a classic example. They buried the truth. There were snippets that came out, but the whole truth has been buried, and it's still buried by the BBC. They just will not go there. So the BBC does bury the truth. I think it does it all the time, and it does it for ideological and political reasons.
Now, the interest, again, all I could say against what Tim has said, when I consider a couple of the characters I've known that have worked in the sort of positions where you could make that stuff, and these are very senior managers, like pretty much at the top of the game. They ain't people who are going to want to bury a grooming gang story in a million years. What they might say is, editorially, can we make this whole thing stand up? I have noticed, and I don't think I'm alone in this, that, and I was going to say, I've got a feeling there's going to be a panorama documentary about the problem with migration in this country, and people are going to go, wow, took them long enough, didn't it? What was the panorama they did the other way? They've done a few of these lately that have been more the kind of thing you might expect to see on a commercial channel. And I've said to a couple of mates that this is deliberate, right? Something is changing. Now, you don't want it all to change. You don't want every panorama to be about the scandal of vape shops. But I think they did do a big news report on that and facilitating drugs in vape shops that went along with it, which did, to a certain degree, touch on the point that Jez just made. I think a bit more of that is coming. I said before, I think the BBC are often guilty by omission, because the point he's made about rape gangs, you probably wouldn't have seen much of that on any news channel, for that matter. So guilty by omission rather than deliberately setting out and going, oh, here's a really good story, but yeah, let's bury it. Let's not tell it. I think it's probably too complicated, and I think it's arguably legally an absolute flipping minefield. But it has been mentioned, it has been raised, and it does come up on Question Time now, thankfully. But I reckon something's coming our way. And if it does, do the BBC get any house points for it? 0344 499 1000. 3:30, this is Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is Talk. This one from... I've got so much of it here. Sharon says, I remember a teacher chucking the block they used to clean the blackboard with at my head because I wouldn't stop talking. That was a common one. I don't know what era we're talking about, Sharon, but my mum, because it wasn't in my era, but throwing a board rubber at a child's head seemed to be quite a common story. Now, you haven't got to know lots about health and safety to realise that a board rubber in your head is quite a dangerous weapon. You could cause an awful lot of damage with that. One here says, so the BBC and the TV licence fee. I'm Canadian and we have the CBC. What's to stop Parliament to just rolling BBC funding into general tax and spend policy, and linking it to income tax like Canada does? Ultimately, the public broadcaster will be paid for by the public, no? Yes, it would be, but then people would still make, I guess, the same argument, wouldn't they? And that is that, well, frankly, we're still paying for something. Why should we? We'll go back to more calls on that shortly. First to this, for years, the government tried to bribe, bully and legislate drivers into electric vehicles. We had a lot of that. Now, near record petrol prices are doing the job for them. Range anxiety is fading, but pump anxiety is the new fear on Britain's roads, apparently. Edmund King is with us, president of the AA. Edmund, good afternoon to you. We know that the motorist gets hit left, right and centre in all manner of ways. The petrol pump of late, I'm seeing it come down a tad this last 7 days. It's only a little bit, though, nothing like it was. But is this what's happening? Are people being now financially enamoured with the EVs?
Yeah, what we do, Ian, we actually publish an EV readiness index every quarter, and it's not pro-EV, it's not anti-EV, it's showing the facts. And what it does, it looks at 8 criteria that may influence someone's choice to going EV. So it looks at costs of a new EV, a used EV, cost of insurance. It looks at running costs like servicing, breakdown, and it looks at charging costs and compares charging costs to petrol. And it's that element over the last 3 months that has really shifted. You know, petrol, yes, you've got it there about 171, diesel 186. And it was those record prices that made people more interested in EVs. So we've got a used car portal, AA Cars, and the searches for used EVs went up 78% in the last 3 months compared to the 3 months before, which is really dramatic. And we kind of put that down to, you know, every time people went to the petrol pumps, fill up with petrol or diesel, they were hit with a heftier bill. And for some people, it got them thinking, well, you know, will an EV save me money? And if you look at running costs alone, if you're lucky enough to be able to charge at home, so you've got off-street parking or you've got a garage or whatever, and charging at home is much cheaper because VAT is only 5%. If you have to charge on street, it's 20%. But if you charge 80% at home, 20% on the public highway, you can save about £960 a year compared to the cost of petrol. So it really is quite considerable.
That is considerable. And of course, the arguments around this, I mean, quite genuinely, Edmund, I've heard more people talking about this than ever before, and that is largely due to the cost of fuel.
Yeah, no, I think so. And other costs have stabilised. Insurance has come down for EVs. In the early days, I think the insurance companies were very, very risk adverse, and they thought, oh, in any collision, if it writes off the main battery of the car, it will cost us a fortune. And that's proved not to be the case. EVs are actually repairable. Some of the battery cells are repairable. So insurance costs have come down as well. I mean, they're still some uncertainty about the charging network, and you do still get the story. What about when I travel up to Scotland or the Lake District or Cornwall? And obviously doing that, you have to rely on the public charging network, which has improved. The government's got a target, I think, of 300,000 public chargers by 2030. I think we're at about 120,000. So we're kind of on target for the number of EVs on the roads, but obviously that has to keep going, and that has to keep pace with the increase in EVs. But certainly on affordability, on a used EV in particular, more so than a brand new one, you can save a fair amount of money, Ian.
Indeed. I guess the worry at the other end of that is that electricity is also going up in price. So are we going to end up in a curious position in about a year's time where the cost of electricity is greater than the current hike in fuel and fuel duty?
Yeah. I mean, we obviously know that fuel prices can be turbulent. Just look at what's happened in the Iran crisis and the Strait of Hormuz and whatever, the fluctuations. I mean, electricity prices, yes. I mean, you're right to flag over the last, I'd say, 2 years, 2.5 years have gone up considerably. I think, yes, difficult to call these things, but I think they are likely to be more stable than oil in the next 2 years. And obviously, if you can bring on cheaper electricity, whether it's wind, whether it's solar, whether it's nuclear, whatever, that would also help the longer term kind of energy security of the country anyway.
On that point, Edmund, great to speak as ever. Thank you for your time, Edmund King. He is, of course, president of the AA. Are you going in that direction for financial reasons? That is the problem, isn't it? I mean, the overarching problem is literally that electricity prices are going up. And if they're going up, are we going to end up in the same kind of doom loop that we've ended up with petrol? I suppose even when petrol was down a bit. Let's remember, when petrol was down, and we're talking about 130 a litre rather than sort of 160 a litre, significant amount in filling up the tank. It was still cheaper then to charge a car from home. But that doesn't mean to say all is good and dandy in the EV world. And I know whenever we do a phone-in on this, people have such mixed experiences, it's quite hard to keep up. Nigel is down in London. Back to flags, Nigel. What have you got for us? Good afternoon.
Well, good afternoon to you. I wanted to say something simple. I think that we live in a country led by an anti-English or anti-British government. It's astonishing that people cannot fly, whether it's the St. George's Cross or the England flag, without being pilloried and made to feel awful. Now, look, I'll give you I'm white, I'm born in England, I'm of Jewish background. My wife is black, she was born in Ghana, she lives here, and we also live abroad, as you know. And where we live in the US, you're encouraged to fly the flag. I remember when I first moved into the original house, the HOA, which is the Homeowners Association, said, "Will you be flying a flag?" I said, "Hopefully." He said, "Of course, we'll be delighted to." They gave us areas where you can fly it. Why is it people here are made to feel horrible and nasty when you can't fly your own country's flag?
Well, it's almost beyond. It's a bit like, we've been searching for reasons that you could logically keep the BBC TV licence, and it's hard to find any.
Sure.
And similarly with this, the idea that your flag is offensive just because once in a while over the course of history someone who's a nut job has waved it and wrapped it around them or whatever. I mean, it's a flag, right? I mean, it's like coins. No one's talking about coins being offensive because they've got the king on them and references to the country.
It won't be too long. Have you been to the Kirby Estate in South London?
Not that I'm aware of. Should I go? Oh, is that where they put the big display of flags out?
That's it, and they do it every time there's an England game there. The guy who runs it is a guy called Chris, who lives on the estate, that make everybody welcome. And the estate is full of people from all different nationalities who live there. Yeah. And they all get together, they fly the flag, they fly a few Portuguese flags and other flags as well, and everybody gets along well. There's no animosity, no anger, no annoyance, and you know what? It's quite lovely to see it. It really is.
It is lovely to see it, and I've literally no idea why, just to go back to your original point on this, why anybody could possibly be offended by it, other than the fact that some people choose to be offended by it, Nigel, which I think is probably more likely to be the scenario, right?
I think you're right. No, I was saying to the lady who took my telephone call, in my local Walmart in the US, there's one area where the whole ceiling is draped in flags, US stars and stripes. If you did that in a Tesco or an M&S or a Waitrose or one of the other well-known supermarkets, there'd be outrage. Can you imagine?
Yeah.
There'd be protests outside.
It would be extraordinary. Yeah, you'd have the very opposite happening.
Absolutely.
If you were to even go there for 1 second. We're living in peculiar times, Nigel. I thought it had got better for a bit, but this is the problem with this is you've now got this is not just sort of some argument on social media between people who like, sort of the Emily Thornberry photo, that kind of stuff. This is literally councils who are potentially threatening their constituents with prison should they be caught sticking a flag on a barrier or a railing somewhere.
Oh, sure. Can I just expand this argument very, very slightly? And I think you're going to like this. You may notice that EV cars in this country have a green flash at the beginning of the number plate to signify it's a green car.
Yeah.
Big deal.
Good.
But have you noticed that some people, you can also, when you have a number plate made up, have an Union flag, an English flag, the Union
Yes,
Jack,
you can.
Union flag. Well, it won't be too long before council saying that's offensive, driving around with that on the back.
It's a very good point, actually, yeah. How dare you acknowledge the country in which you are currently in, which is a bit weird, isn't it, really? Nigel, thank you very much indeed. Always good to talk. Nigel down in London, 0344 499 1000. Rachel says, if people are uncomfortable seeing our wonderful flag, a symbol of everything this country has ever stood for, maybe they'd feel more comfortable somewhere else like North Korea. It is bizarre, and the irony, of course, in North Korea is you're probably compelled to stick a flag up. You certainly have to put that fat bloke's face up in your house, don't you? In fact, if you don't do that, then you're in trouble. Or is it the picture of that woman newsreader who's just been going for it? Is she real, by the way? Was she sort of early AI? Because I swear she's not changed since I was about 9. So, but one of those, you would be, literally the state would have something to say if you didn't. 0344 499 1000. 3:45, this is Talk. And, of course, a reminder that it is World Cup 2026, and you cannot be unaware of that, particularly since we have not one but 2 countries out there at the moment. Scotland, great first win. England, great first win. And it's officially kicked off. Here at Talk, we're celebrating in style. How do you fancy getting your hands on £26,000 cash free? 26,000 quid cash free. Imagine what you could do with all of that money. If you could do with a boost to your bank balance, then believe me, this summer will just be a little more special than you previously thought. These are the details on how you can enter.
For your chance to win, visit talk.tv/win or text TALK to 83338 by 6 p.m. on the 20th of July 2026. Texts cost £2.50 plus your standard network rate. Or send your name and number by post to Comp 1, PO Box 3190, Colchester CO2 8GP, to arrive by midnight on the 23rd of July 2026. 18 plus, UK residents only. So for your chance to win, text TALK to 83338 now. This is a network promotion. Full T's and C's at talk.tv/win.
We've actually put up with half a century of being told that somehow our national flag is a symbol of oppression. Now, I think if Oxfordshire do this, they'll find themselves completely and utterly defied. People will literally just defy this. And you know what? If people have moved to this country and they don't like our flag, I've got a really simple idea. Go back to where you came from.
Do you ever fear about being arrested because of the socks you wear, Nigel Farage?
Well, I do. You want to see the underpants? Oh, dear, no.
There's the thought. Thank you. Wow.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is Talk, 10 to even, 10 to 4. Let's go to Matthew in Newport on flags. Matthew, what have you got for us? Afternoon to you.
Boy, I'm going to be the outlier on this one, aren't I?
Go on. You might be, but you're in South Wales, so, you know, maybe you've got a different take on it.
Well, I'm also Bristol born and bred, so...
Okay.
No, I think it makes me feel uncomfortable. It makes me feel embarrassed to see them up. I drive through a street going... Yeah, I'll quantify what I mean by it.
Yeah.
Or qualify, sorry. I go through a street up to my old hometown, and it's lined with the English flags. And it's difficult to say this, but maybe it's a social thing, maybe it's an educational thing, but all the people I hear being involved in showing these flags, I think they got the nickname gammons now, and they seem to be quite unlikable people. And everyone keeps talking about the US like that last chap. We are not America. We don't chant the anthem. And likewise in America, you know, I'll give Talk its due. It's pushing a narrative, obviously, but you know, not everyone in the US likes Trump.
Well, that's very
not
true.
Everyone in this country likes flags up. It's not patriotism. It's a form of nationalism. It's being backed by religious zealots. It's the images, the imagery of Nazi Germany just comes to mind, and it makes you feel uncomfortable.
But it is a
You know what
flag.
I mean?
It is a country's flag, right? I mean, it's meant to be a country's flag,
I know, but,
like a country's
don't-
coin or £5 notes.
You're being flippant, aren't you? I know you are. I know you've got to get people to ring in like me to have a go, and you've got to get people to agree
because
with you.
I've got some good questions that I want to put to you.
Royal occasions, fine. Sporting events, fine. But it's
Right.
the overall feeling that this is giving. It's not a welcome, inclusive.
Do
feeling,
you
is it?
okay? Do
It's
you
you
sense?
friend
And
people that
I've
don't
heard
belong
no,
here.
I've heard that argument. Just to slightly concur with one thing, when it comes to flags, when I walk down the Mall in London, the road towards Buckingham Palace, which I don't do very often. In fact, I've driven down there in a cab more than I've walked. And you see the uniformity of flags. That seems a perfect place for flags to be. Westminster Abbey, places like that, they are there almost permanently because they're meant to be about the identity of the country. That surely doesn't offend you.
No, of course it doesn't. And I think that the thing is, but let me get this into a sort of a balanced view here, is that if you've got it flying on an occasion, I think it was one of the, you know, I'm by no means a royalist, but he did a good job around the States, old Charlie, is that, you know, when you were there and they had an occasion, and that I think it might be the Olympics, they lined it with flags. It looked very impressive, and it was, you know, but it still gave you that feeling of this is what Nazi Germany did. I mean, they went out on a massive basis to get
Why
that
would it
flag
give?
up.
Why would it give you that feeling?
Because we were the country that took on that
But if you go to Brussels or Paris, you will see many more flags than you'd ever see here.
I don't care about other countries.
Well, but if your argument is, but the symbolism of flags as a collective is that they remind you of Nazi Germany, you would therefore apply that to all countries that fly flags.
I can guarantee you now, if you had a country like France and they had an underbelly of a group of people like the EDL or the other groups that have been around who use that flag, they would be the same as us. They've got the same moral compass. And I think the thing is, what we've got to realise here is this is being backed and pushed by a certain faction.
So, okay, just to clarify then, Matthew, you're saying
fascism is being normalised.
So you're saying, I mean, I think that takes it too far, and I think you probably know it takes it too far. But
of course
the point being is that there's two things I think going on here. Number one is, at the moment, it's a football match. So you'd have to people who would never, ever fly a flag under any circumstances are flying flags, whether it's on their car, in their window, whatever. So I think you have to separate that. But the more recent campaigns about raising the colours and putting flags up has really come as a bit of a backlash, Matthew, against the ineptitude of governments, against the ineptitude of immigration policies. To say, you're not thinking of the people of this country, you're thinking of other people.
Let's get this in proportion, okay? It's coincidental that there is a football match on and people will show their allegiance to the Scottish flag, a Welsh flag, and Welsh are very proud of their flags. They might be very, the Welsh are extremely...
They've got a flipping dragon on it. If anything's more menacing than a dragon, it terrifies me.
But I'll tell you what, there aren't that many of them being flown in people's houses.
Well, that's because they're not in the World Cup, mate, but that's another story.
No, they are, aren't they?
No.
I thought they qualified this year. Okay.
Scotland
How much do I know? Okay, so
that's another country.
But the point is, even the type of people who do fly them over here are not the likeable people. And if you look at the Fly the Flags scheme, what have we just found out about the people who were involved in that? The criminal activities of them and what has happened? Have you had that out on this non-mainstream media?
I'm not even. I'm not familiar instinctively, but I can kind of broadly understand what you're saying. Of course, there are going to be people.
I'd look it up then.
All right. Of course, there will be people who are. Gravitate to a flag for, this is my country, not your country. I get that, of course, but I don't think the average person who's sticking a flag on the balcony of the 5th floor of their tower block where they live right now is doing that because that's who they are.
If they want to hang it from their tower block, fine. If they put them up in my street or down the streets, get them down. And that is what the council really are aiming at. Flying a flag out your window. Although, again, I'll go back to it, and it's an absolute generalisation. I don't find these people likeable.
Okay.
They are generally.
Do you think though? Do you think we should be sending people to jail for 2 years for sticking a flag on a barrier?
No.
Good.
But if they were doing anything to cause riots, to encourage people to set fire to hotels and burn people, yes.
Well, that's a whole different ballgame of people. I get what you're saying, but that I don't think, in fact, I know, does not represent the average person who flies a flag. Matthew, it's been great locking horns on this one. We're all about that. In fact, I wish sometimes we get more of a counter view on some things that are said. Thank you for your call, Matthew in Newport. This in from Graham, who says, the BBC shop is in our lounge, so can I shoplift and not pay the licence fee? And because it's under 200 quid, I won't get charged. Do you think this thought has any traction in the current climate? So you've stolen the... Yeah, I hear what you're saying. It's would be seen as a minor theft. But then they can still come round to your house as well, and they still apparently do that. It used to be more sinister. We've still got that clip, Sam, that we played earlier at the beginning of the programme. I can only think this is from the 1950s or something. They put on the TV to try... 1961, so this goes way back. This is how they warned you about not paying your TV licence.
Licensed dodgers, watch out. The Minister of Post and Telecommunications, John Stonehouse, is on the warpath. Nearly 1.25 million householders watch the telly and don't buy a license. But they'd better, and quick. Detector vans with highly efficient equipment are out in force seeking TV bandits in an intensive campaign to cut back drastically the number of Welshers.
The number of bandits and Welshers. So in 1961, over 1 million people had not paid their TV licence, Kev.
I'll tell you, you know the story about those vans, those TV detective vans.
Well,
there was nothing in them.
There was nothing inside.
There was nothing in them. They used to have all this sort of fake aerials above it, as if we could. So they were just to scare the population.
There was an ad that used to go out, and they had a guy driving it and a fella in the back going, "It's number 63."
Yeah,
they're in the
exactly right.
They're in the dining room.
And they're watching Coronation
They're watching
Street.
Coronation
Exactly.
Street.
Well, apparently they had no such equipment because they did it all by whether or not people had
Just on
TV
paper,
licenses
wasn't it?
and then they didn't pay